Chapter 1162. The poisoned king Zhongqing Chen Zhe was the person who revealed the intelligence from Zhong Yinqiu to the otherworldly demonic tribe, causing the latter to nearly be unable to return from the Qiuwu palace. A person like him should be deeply condemned by the master-teacher pavilion, and yet, Principal Zhong was proposing to offer the highest of compliments to him? This was too bizarre. On the other hand, seeing that Wu Shi didn't comprehend what he was driving at, Zhong Xian shook his head and explained, at this point, Chen Zhe's crimes are only known to a handful within the master-teacher pavilion. This is actually disadvantageous to us. In order to officially indict Chen Zhe of a crime and justify his arrest, we'll need to convince the entire master-teacher pavilion of our case, and that would require more evidence than just old Principal Zhong Yinqiu's testimony. However, that is one thing that we are lacking at the moment. If we were to disregard that and forcefully pin an accusation on Chen Zhe, it will appear as if we are trying to conceal our depraved actions instead. On top of that, the fact that Chen Zhe has even passed away in the master-teacher pavilion plays against us as well. Think about it, we have captured Chen Zhe, but Chen Zhe ended up dying in captivity. What do you think the others would think about the matter? This. Wu Shi fell silent. It was normal for others to sympathize with the weak, but whether the weak was truly weak or not was often one thing that couldn't be clearly seen on the surface. If they were to really attempt to pin a crime on Chen Zhe, as long as someone were to work behind their backs and fabricate a story to accuse Wu Shi of abusing his authority to deal with Chen Zhe, the common populace would be unable to discern which point of view was true. In such situations, the tendency was for them to naturally sympathize with the victim, Chen Zhe. By then, the tables would be turned. Their advantageous situation would turn into a deeply disadvantageous one in an instant. On the other hand, if we were to declare that he has died and bestow his family with huge riches for the matter, the other party might think that news has been leaked and panic. By then, the other party might very well do something that would give themselves away. As long as we can lure the other party out, the rest would be simple. As for Chen Zhe, it wouldn't be too late to indict him of his crime then. Zhong Xian said. I see. Wu Shi came to a realization. That was indeed the best plan they had at the moment. Not only would it resolve the adverse effects brought about by Chen Zhe's death, it could also potentially bait the other party out. Truly two birds in a stone. I'll have it done now. Nodding, Wu Shi quickly turned to the 6-star master teacher beside him to issue instructions. What else should we do? After making arrangements, Wu Shi asked once more. For the time being, this should be enough. Tonight, we'll still be attending the appraisal convention that you spoke about. Don't worry, we have already placed the bait dangling before them. Now, we just have to wait to hook something up. Zhong Xian smiled. Wu Shi nodded before falling silent. After leaving Chen Zhe's cell, Zhong Xian headed straight for the master-teacher pavilion's library. With Wu Shi's identity token in his hand, he was qualified to access the Saint 3 Dan and Saint 4 Dan cultivation techniques in there. In less than 2 hours, he had already collected everything into his library of Heaven's Path. After that was done, he took out the books which Emperor Chu Tianxing had given him and collected them into his library of Heaven's Path too. Compile. The library of Heaven's Path jolted, and 2 new books materialized before Zhong Xian's eyes. They were the Saint 3 Dan and Saint 4 Dan Heaven's Path Divine Art. Swiftly browsing through them, Zhong Xian's eyes lit up in excitement. They have both reached the level of Heaven's Path, I can cultivate them straight now. This seemed to be the first time he had collected the Heaven's Path Divine Art for 2 realms in advance. With these 2, he would be able to make a breakthrough on the spot to Saint 4 Dan Primordial Spirit Realm. However, the sky seems to be getting dark. I should first head over to the appraisal convention with Wu Shi before cultivating. Zhong Xian glanced out of the windows and saw that the sun had already set. The appraisal convention that Wu Shi had mentioned previously should be starting any time soon, so he couldn't afford to spend any time on cultivation for the time being. Thus, he stretched his back lazily and walked out of the library. In any case, everything would be simple once he had the required cultivation techniques. At most, it would only take him 2 hours or so, or at the very worst, 4 hours. Either way, he could have it done very quickly. Besides, there was no such thing as a cultivation bottleneck to him. Once he cultivated, the technique would surely reach the mastery of consummation. Thus, for the time being, it was more imperative for him to bring all of his supporting occupations to 7-star and become a 7-star master teacher first. Principal Zhong, let's set forth, Wu Shi said with a smile upon seeing Zhong Xian walking towards him. After which, the duo headed out together. While Zhong Xian and Wu Shi were heading to the appraisal convention, in a vast hall in the royal palace. Damn it, damn it. King Zhongqing paced around the room as he clenched his teeth tightly in fury. Hatred burned within his eyes like raging inferno, as if they would burn down everything in its sight. Enough. You sure have gotten brazen to attempt to make a move against a 6-star master teacher without making ample preparations. Chu Tianxing harumphed coldly. Your Majesty, I. King Zhongqing quickly clasped his fist to explain himself. Forget it, you don't have to explain anything to me. Just learn from this lesson and make sure that you never commit it in the future. Know that it took me a heavy price to bail you out. Chu Tianxing waved his hand impatiently. I apologize for my inept. King Zhongqing lowered his head and said, all right, that's enough of that. For the next few days, you should remain in my royal palace to cultivate and reflect on where you have gone wrong. During this timing, you can't afford to have anyone finding any more handle on you, or else no one will be able to save you. Chu Tianxing instructed. Yes. King Zhongqing nodded. Don't worry, there shouldn't be any more problems. The main issue at hand lies with that Zhong Xian. He really isn't an easy fellow to deal with. Furthermore, his cultivation is much higher than we have previously anticipated. As King Zhongqing spoke about Zhong Xian, he couldn't help but grit his teeth furiously. However, as soon as he said those words, his face suddenly paled, and his body began shaking uncontrollably. This is bad. King Zhongqing narrowed his eyes as goosebumps rose all over his body. What's wrong? Chu Tianxing frowned. I have been poisoned. Pu. King Zhongqing's body began convulsing non-stop, and large mouthfuls of blood spurted from his mouth. He felt as if all of his organs were about to shatter any time soon. Poisoned? How did you get poisoned? Chu Tianxing's eyes widened in alarm. King Jinqing had been beside him for the last few minutes, so how could he be suddenly poisoned without any warning? I have no idea either. The immense pain rendered King Zhongqing incapable of standing on his feet, and he rolled around the ground wildly, hoping that it would alleviate his pain somehow. Cold sweat trickled down his entire body, and no matter how he contemplated over the matter, he simply couldn't recall when he was afflicted with the poison. Did you eat or drink anything today? Chu Tianxing asked anxiously. For even King Zhongqing, a Saint 4 Dan pinnacle expert, to be unable to tolerate it, the poison was truly fearsome. An individual who had such a potent poison in his possession and could poison King Zhongqing without the latter noticing had to be a 7-star pinnacle poison master at the very least. But if such a figure had appeared by King Zhongqing's side, he would have known it. Why did he have no impression of it whatsoever? Today, King Zhongqing began recalling everything that had happened earlier, that Zhong Xian has fed me several gourds of fine wine, and that Sun Qiong has sprinkled salt and pepper over my body. There couldn't be anything wrong with the food in his King Zhongqing manner, and he hadn't touched the food in the Master Teacher Pavilion either. The only thing left was Zhong Xian's wine and Sun Qiong's condiments. Sprinkled salt and pepper over your body? Chu Tianxing was stunned. What the heck was that? However, he knew that this wasn't the time to be asking about that. With a deep frown, he remarked, from the looks of it, the culprit seems to be that Zhong Xian. Just that. What kind of poison is this? Men, summon royal physician Sun over. Yes. A guard quickly bowed and rushed out of the room. Not too long later, an elder entered the hall. Your Majesty, UN royal physician Sun, King Zhongqing has been poisoned, and I would like you to analyze what kind of poison it is and treat him. Chu Tianxing instructed. Royal physician Sun was a 7-star pinnacle physician specially employed by the royal court, and his comprehension of the way of medicine had already reached a profound level. If anyone could treat King Zhongqing, it had to be him. Your Majesty, rest assured, as long as the poison isn't beyond grade 7, I'm confident that I'll be able to resolve it easily. Royal physician Sun smiled, revealing a row of perfectly yellow teeth. With a flick of his finger, He swiftly weaved his junqi into thin threads, which swiftly wrapped itself around King Zhongqing in the shape of a sphere. This was his exclusive diagnosis and treatment method, sonar diagnosis cocoon. By linking his junqi threads to the vitals and acupoints of the patient, he would be able to take a closer examination on the patient's condition through the vibrations through the junqi threads, and thus, making an accurate diagnosis of the patient's condition. Chem. There's something really weird about the poison. Royal physician Sun analyzed King Zhongqing's condition for a moment, and a deep frown surfaced on his forehead. Weird. Chu Tianxing's face darkened. Can he be treated? Your Majesty, rest assured. Even though the poison is elusive and nearly indiscernible, I should be able to figure what is going on by sending my junqi threads into King Zhongqing's body through the junqi thread diagnosis method, and from that, resolve the poison. Physician Sun said confidently. Hurry up then. Seeing King Zhongqing's face turn ghastly pale, as if he would succumb to the poison at any moment, Chu Tianxing urged. Yes. Royal physician Sun nodded. Taking a deep breath, he flicked his fingers forward. Tzzzzzzzzzz. A surge of junqi shot from his fingers into King Zhongqing's glabella, and it swiftly dived its way into the latter's meridians. The junqi thread diagnosis method involved sending junqi threads into the body of the patient to examine the latter's inner condition to determine the source of the injury or illness, thus allowing the physician to treat the issue at its root. Since the sonar diagnosis cocoon wasn't sufficient to determine the lethal poison which King Zhongqing was suffering from, he could only resort to this method. Before long, his junqi had already made its way around the King Zhongqing's body, but there was still no lethal poison to be seen. Perplexed, royal physician Sun retracted his junqi and contemplated with a deep frown. He had checked every nook and cranny within King Zhongqing's body, but there was not a trace of any poison to be seen. Yet, the other party's internal organs were corroding, clearly the doing of a lethal poison. These contradicting situations had left him deeply bewildered. How is it? Chu Tianxing asked anxiously. There's something really bizarre about the poison. I need some time to think of a solution. Halfway through his words, royal physician Sun's face suddenly turned ghastly pale. His body abruptly fell heavily onto the ground before convulsing wildly. Huge mouthfuls of blood spurted wildly from his mouth, rendering his face a shade paler each time. Darn it, I was poisoned as well. As he said those words, his body convulsed a few more times before he passed out altogether. This. Chu Tianxing was astonished. It was just a moment ago that the other party declared confidently that he would be able to resolve the poison, and yet, before he could even determine what kind of poison it was, he had already passed out. The other party was already the most formidable physician in the royal palace, but he still ended up succumbing to the poison. Against a lethal poison which could affect even a 7-star pinnacle physician unknowingly, what could they possibly do? Your Majesty, I have a handful of poison masters imprisoned in my manor. Bring one of them over. King Zhongqing uttered weakly. Hold on, I'll send my men to bring them over, Chu Tianxing said before turning to his men to issue some commands. Under the orders of the emperor, the guards swiftly made their way over to the King Zhongqing manor, and not too long later, they returned with a black-robed young man. He was no other than Butler Qin. Old master, the poison masters in the residence has been released by Zhong Xian. Released. Pu. At this point, King Zhongqing was already withered internally and externally. At this moment, he didn't even have the strength to move around anymore, as if an old man languishing on his deathbed. There are no poison masters left, and the physicians aren't capable of treating it either. I'll go look for Zhongsha personally. To think that a master teacher would actually resort to such underhanded tricks. Chu Tianxing roared lividly. He had to pay such a heavy price in order to bail King Zhongqing out. If the latter were to die of poison shortly after, wouldn't his Qingyuan royal family become a laughingstock of the populace? Zhongsha. Poison. Upon hearing those words, Butler Qin swiftly turned to Chu Tianxing and asked with his head lowered, Your Majesty, was our old master poisoned by Zhong Xian? It must be him. No one else had a chance to strike other than him. Chu Tianxing harumphed in anger. If he's the one behind the poison. Butler Qin paused for a brief moment as confidence emerged on his face. I know how to alleviate the poison. Chapter 1163, Butler Qin's unique poison neutralization technique. Chu Tianxing and King Zhongqing looked at Butler Qin in bewilderment. It was a poison that even the 7-star pinnacle royal physician's son was helpless before, even passing out after being afflicted with the poison himself, so how could a butler who didn't know the slightest thing about poison possibly know how to alleviate it? To be honest, I was also afflicted with the poison a while back, but I managed to keep it under control using a certain method, Butler Qin replied. Hearing that his subordinate had been poisoned by Zhongxian as well but managed to overcome the poison, King Zhongqing immediately exclaimed, "Is that true? What are you waiting for then? Hurry up and treat me." "Yes, old master. The treatment might be a little painful, so I ask you to bear with it," Butler Qin said grimly as he stepped forward. "I have been through innumerable life and death situations. What kind of pain have I not suffered before? Rest assured and do it." King Zhongqing replied proudly. Back in his time, he had charged into many a battlefield and survived against the odds. No matter how painful a poison neutralization process was, how could it compare to the experiences he had been through on the battlefield? "As long as you are able to cure my poison, I'll immediately promote you to the official head butler of my manor, granting you authority to mobilize anyone within the manor." Before King Zhongqing could finish his words, he suddenly saw a palm enlarging swiftly before him, covering his entire sight in an instant. "Pa!" The slap struck King Zhongqing's face squarely, and the stinging pain threatened to tear his cheeks into two. "You!" Not expecting his subordinate to slap him instead of treating him, King Zhongqing felt so furious that he was on the brink of insanity. However, before he could even finish his words, another slap had already flown right for his face. "Pa! Pa! Pa! Pa!" A series of consecutive slaps left King Zhongqing's face swelling up as if a crimson bun. Butler Qin had exerted his full strength in those slaps, such that he was already panting from exhaustion. He carefully raised his gaze and looked at King Zhongqing. "Old master, are you feeling better now? Better your head. You bastard, I'm going to kill you." With his eyes reddening in rage, King Zhongqing stood up with a belligerent air around him. To think that he, the first king of the Qingyuan Empire, would actually be pummeled by his own subordinate, not to mention, in front of Emperor Chu Tianxing at that. And as if that was not enough, the other party even had the cheek to ask him if he was feeling better after. "Better your head? That is as good as a rapist asking his victim if it felt good. I'm going to beat you into the ground, you bastard." King Zhongqing was so furious that it also seemed as if smoke was pouring out of his head. "You still aren't feeling better yet? Old master, worry not. I still have another trick up my sleeve." On the other hand, Butler Qin didn't expect the slaps to not work, so he hurriedly tried to appease the other party first. "You still have another trick up your sleeve?" King Zhongqing was taken aback for a moment upon hearing those words. Before he could even process what was going on, he saw Butler Qin taking off his shoes, and in the next moment, a leg emanating an exceptional scent flew right toward his face. Pang! The impact of the kick left King Zhongqing's face distorted into the shape of a fried dough twist before he flipped around 2.5 times in the air and collapsed heavily onto the ground. Butler Qin had experimented on himself when he found the effectiveness of the slaps a little lacking, and he had to admit that the kick did have miraculous effects against the poison. In an instant, the pain vanished from his body like a receding tide. He had been planning on treasuring this secret art as his family heirloom, vowing to only pass it down to those of his lineage. However, since the old master required it, he had no choice but to take it out. "I'll kill you." Seeing the teeth that had dropped to the ground and the amazing stench that filled his nostrils, King Zhongqing nearly went insane on the spot. He had ordered his subordinate to treat his poison, but not only did the latter do nothing of that sort, the latter even dared to slap and kick him. Unforgivable. Standing up furiously, he glared at his subordinate with a piercing glare, ready to tear the fellow before him into two. But before he could make a move, Chu Tianxing suddenly spoke. "King Zhongqing, your poison has been cured." Poison? Those abrupt words jolted King Zhongqing out of his rampage. All of a sudden, he realized that the pain from the lethal poison had really receded after the slaps and kick. Overwhelmed by astonishment, the rage from a moment ago completely vanished from his mind. he quickly asked Butler Chin in bewilderment. "This. What is going on?" Butler Chin clasped his fist and explained the matter. "Old master, earlier today, when you asked me to invite Zhongxian over to the manor, we had a small verbal conflict, and he discreetly planted a poison in me. I had a physician look at the poison, and the latter said that not only is the poison indiscernible, it will even corrode one's inner organs, putting one in unbearable agony. However, he did inform me of a way to alleviate the poison, and that is to hit one's face. The more vicious the strike is, the more effective it will be against the poison. That's also why I brazenly made a move against you, and I beg for your pardon. The poison is alleviated through slapping? There's actually such a poison in the world." King Zhongqing and Chu Tianxing glanced at one another in disbelief. They had never encountered or heard of such a bizarre poison in the world. "That's right." Butler Chin replied affirmatively. "To actually concoct such a poison, that Zhongxian sure is a depraved individual." King Zhongqing's lips twitched furiously as he cursed, but halfway through his words, his body suddenly jolted. He felt that excruciating pain from before slowly returning to his body. "This is bad, it's acting up once more. Quick, hit me again." Recalling that unbearable pain, King Zhongqing could not help but tremble in fear. He never wanted to experience such a sensation ever again. He quickly pulled Butler Chin over as he stuck his face out to the other party and exclaimed in desire, "Harder. To think that it could work this way as well." Shortly after walking out of the master-teacher pavilion, Zhongxian suddenly chuckled beneath his breath. Wu Shi turned around and asked, "Is there something wrong?" "It's nothing," Zhongxian replied calmly with a smile. When he had been curing King Zhongqing's wounds earlier in the latter's manor, he had secretly slipped a sliver of his will into the other party's body. It was concealed within his Heaven's Path Shunqi, making it difficult for even a primordial spirit realm expert to notice it. He had made it such that in fixed intervals or whenever the other party insulted him, the Heaven's Path Shunqi would turn into lethal poison and ravage the other party's body. It was precisely because he had left such a hand that he did not hesitate to have King Zhongqing released. In any case, King Zhongqing's life and death hinged on a single thought of his, so it mattered not whether the other party was imprisoned or not. Initially, he had only chosen to spare Butler Chin in case he might require a pawn to use in the near future, but who would have thought that the latter would actually end up believing in his face-slapping treatment method? That actually worked to his advantage for the time being, so he decided to go along with it. After all, even though he had set King Zhongqing free for the moment, he was still more than willing to see the other party suffer, especially after seeing with his own eyes what the other party had done to Sun Qiong and the Poison Hall. Under the control of the sliver of will he had slipped into the other party's body, he was able to create the impression that slapping one's face would be able to alleviate the corrosion of the poison. Of course, the slapping would not actually cure the poison. In truth, the Heaven's Path Shunqi was just switched back from its poisonous state temporarily. The poison would recede under vicious slapping and act up if the slapping were to halt for some time. He could probably entertain himself for quite a few days with that. However, it was another question whether King Zhongqing would be able to last that long or not. After communicating with the will that he had hidden within the other party's body for a moment, Zhongxian decided to put aside the matter and follow behind Wu Shi. Not too long later, they arrived at a massive trading hall. Zhongxian took a look at the surroundings, and after confirming his location, he could not help but ask in bewilderment, "Isn't this where the appraiser hall is located?" Based on the directions from Hall Master Xing, the location they were currently at should have been the appraiser hall, so why was a huge trading hall standing before them instead? You should also know about how intricately linked the appraiser hall is with trade. Many businesses rise in the vicinity of its establishment, so it was inevitable that it eventually developed into a trading hall, Wu Shi explained with a smile. That's true. Zhongxian nodded. Appraisers were capable of determining the authenticity of artifacts, and in the master-teacher continent, authenticity had always been a problem for both buyers and sellers alike. Receiving an appraiser's certificate on a good was equivalent to having a guarantee on the quality of the good, and naturally, sellers would be able to sell it at a higher price. At the same time, knowing that the authenticity of the good had been verified by an expert, buyers could also purchase it with their mind at ease. Thus, it was inevitable that businesses would gradually sprout in the vicinity of the appraiser guild, and as time passed, a trading hall would be constructed around it, thus becoming the center of commerce within the city. Actually, there is something that has been on my mind for quite some time already. If I'm not mistaken, the appraisal convention that you spoke of should be an event to verify the authenticity of precious artifacts. However, if that's the case, why would the head of the Painter Guild attend the convention as well? Zhong Xian asked. Since the main focus of the event was appraising, it was peculiar that those of another occupation would be there as well. As you know, appraisers deal with artifacts of all sorts. Tonight, one of the artifacts that will be appraised is a painting left behind by the sorrowless old man, Wuxia explained. Sorrowless old man? He's the most famous painter in the history of the Qingyuan Empire. An extremely talented individual, he was an 8-star painter before he reached 300 years old. Unfortunately, on the third day after his 300th birthday, he vanished without a trace. As for where he went, no one knows for sure. However, there are rumors that he was killed by his enemies, Wuxia explained. 300 years old? Isn't that age considered young for Saint Realm cultivators? Why would others address him as the sorrowless old man? Zhong Xian asked in confusion. Even Hall Master Xing and Wuxia were at least 500 years old. In comparison, 300 years could really be considered young among Saint Realm cultivators, so that title seemed to be a little inappropriate. It is said that in the earlier years of the sorrowless old man, his talents in cultivation and painting were unexceptional. Even as he approached 180, he was still nowhere near to reaching Saint Realm. However, his talents suddenly blossomed one day. Within a short 10 years, his mastery in painting surged all the way to 7-star, and he managed to advance his cultivation to Saint Realm as well. Nevertheless, due to his late breakthrough, he still retained his old appearance despite his lengthened lifespan, and it was because of his old appearance that others addressed him as the sorrowless old man, Wuxia explained. I see. Zhong Xian nodded. The average lifespan of a transcendent mortal was around 200, and typically speaking, a 180 years old transcendent mortal cultivator stood no chance of achieving a breakthrough at all. To suddenly be enlightened in the way of painting and successfully advance to sainthood at his age, it must be said that the sorrowless old man was indeed a legend. While chatting, the duo entered the trading hall. The trading hall was far larger than Zhong Xian had expected. There were all sorts of artifacts on display, and a huge crowd was walking back and forth between the vendors, seeking the items they required. Curious, Zhong Xian activated his eye of insight and scanned through the array of items on display. A while later, he could not help but shake his head in disappointment. There were a couple of items that could be considered a treasure to transcendent mortal cultivators, but to him, they were completely useless. Most of the items on the first floor of the trading hall are miscellaneous goods that have not yet been appraised, so they are relatively inexpensive. Most of those on this floor loiter with the hopes of stumbling on a treasure. It would be best if they could hit the jackpot, but even if they do not, they won't make a big loss either, Wuxia said. It's from the second floor onwards that the artifacts have been appraised. While their prices are slightly pricier, there's at least a guarantee on the authenticity of the goods. Does Principal Zhong want to take a look around the trading hall first? Zhong Xian shook his head. There's no need for that. What he lacked the most at that moment was concentrated high-tier spirit stones. Other than that, there was not any particular artifact that he required. As for medicinal herbs, ores, and the sort, he had already gotten what he needed from Emperor Chu Tianxing, so there was no need for him to go to the trouble of purchasing them. Since there was nothing he required, there was no need for him to browse through the items in the trading hall either. Since that's the case, let's head straight for the 5th floor then. The appraisal convention is being held there. Nodding with a smile, Wuxia led the way forward. Walking through the crowd, it did not take long for them to arrive on the 5th floor. Instead of stores, there was a vast hall on the 5th floor. Before Zhong Xian could enter the hall, he suddenly spotted 2 men walking over, and upon seeing one of their faces, he could not help but halt for an instant. The person was none other than the young man whom he had encouraged earlier in the day, the offspring of the Zhong clan, Zhong Zhouxiao. Chapter 1164, Evocative Vividness. Dressed in a light green robe, Zhong Zhouxiao had a look deeply reminiscent of a scholar. Pinned on his chest was not the emblem of a master teacher but that of an appraiser, and the 7 stars gleaming on the emblem signified the outstanding skills he had in the field. The one that came along with him was an elder who appeared to be in his 60s. The aura that he emanated revealed his Saint 4 Dan cultivation, and there was a 7-star appraiser emblem on his chest as well. That fellow is an appraiser as well? Zhong Xian was taken aback. Having witnessed Zhong Zhouxiao conducting calligraphy in the air, he knew that the latter possessed exceptional proficiency in painting. He had not expected the latter to be a 7-star appraiser as well. As expected of the number 1 genius of the Qingyuan Empire, he was indeed no simple figure. Upon seeing the elder, Wu Shi quickly walked up to him and greeted with a smile. Guild leader Mu, it has been long since we last met. Wu Rufeng, were you not going to pay me a visit if I didn't send you the invitation to the appraisal convention? Have you long forgotten about the many years of friendship between us? The elder patted Wu Shi's shoulders and berated him jokingly. Of course not. I was already planning to pay you a visit, but then you sent me the invitation, Wu Shi replied with a smile. Hearing the conversation between the two, Zhong Xian noted internally, this elder seems to be the head of the appraiser hall. Considering the 7-star appraiser emblem and how Wu Shi addressed the other party, it was not too difficult to figure out the other party's identity. While he was assessing the guild leader before him, Zhong Xian suddenly felt a gaze falling on him. Raising his head, he saw Zhong Zhouxiao staring at him with a slight hint of enmity in his eyes. To be honest, the hostility the other party emanated was so vague that it would have been nearly indiscernible for anyone else, but with his soul depth of 25.1, which was comparable to an 8-star master teacher, it was still rather easy for him to perceive it. He is hostile toward me. Why? I don't think I have offended him before. Zhong Xian was perplexed. The both of them had only met once back on the heart-tempering bridge, and he had even cheered the other party on with a "you can do it." It was one thing for the other party not to reciprocate his goodwill, but to carry enmity against him on top of that. What the heck was the other party up to? Just as Zhong Xian was lamenting how difficult it was to be a good person nowadays, the young man walked up to him and clasped his fist. I am Zhong Zhouxiao, how may I address you? I am Zhong Xian. Zhong Xian? Are you the newly appointed principal of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy? I have heard much of your talent. Upon hearing the name, Zhong Zhouxiao came to a realization. It's no wonder you possess such exceptional mental fortitude, being able to cross the heart-tempering bridge with ease. It's indeed impossible to govern an entire academy without an exceptional state of mind. He had been wondering whom the 6-star master teacher who had broken his record was, and upon learning of the other party's identity, he felt as if the burden in his heart had been lifted. He had heard bits and pieces of Zhong Xian's affairs, and the latter was indeed worthy of being considered a prodigy among geniuses. However, the other party was still only a 6-star master teacher, no matter how talented he was. Against him, a true 7-star master teacher, the other party was clearly still far from a match. It's due to the appreciation of the teachers and students in the academy that I accepted the position of the principal in the first place. To be honest with you, I am intending to resign soon, Zhong Xian replied humbly. Since the old principal of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, Zhong Yinqiu, had returned, he had been wanting to step down, just that the others had been unwilling to accept his resignation. Resign? Well, I guess that's to be expected. Despite your talent, your young age still limits your experience. It wouldn't reflect too well on the academy to have a master teacher as young as you as its principal. Zhong Zhouxiao nodded in agreement. Not expecting his words of humility to be taken for real, Zhong Xian shook his head with a helpless smile. It was the norm in such social settings to keep up pleasantries. More than manners, it was a sign of politeness and respect for the other party. He could tell that Zhong Zhouxiao was trying to put him down, and while he would not go to the extent of getting into a squabble with the other party over something as inconsequential as this, he was not interested in putting up with it either. Thus, he chose to take his leave instead. However, before he could do so, the other party continued speaking. Since Wu Shi has brought you to this appraisal convention, it must mean that he has a high opinion of you. Is Zhong Shi an appraiser as well? Out of politeness, Zhong Xian replied, yes, I have learned a little bit of appraising in my spare time. May I know what your current rank in it is? Zhong Jiuxiao asked curiously. I am currently a 5-star appraiser, replied Zhong Xian nonchalantly. The previous appraiser hall that he had been to was in Honghai City of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance. Over there, the highest emblem he could receive was only 5-star, so he had been stuck with it until now. 5-star? I see. Given your current age, it's actually not too bad. At the very least, it does show that you have some talent in the field. As long as you work diligently on it, it might be possible for you to overtake me in the future. Zhong Jiuxiao nodded. To tell you the truth, 5-star appraisers are actually unqualified to attend the appraisal convention, but it seems like Wu Shi has specially brought you here to expand your horizons. Seems so, Zhong Xian replied casually. Zhong Jiuxiao nodded before continuing. The appraisal convention this time around is far grander than the previous few. The appraiser hall has invited many leading figures in their own occupation this time around, so it's very likely that a few valuable treasures might appear later on. Since it's fate that we have met, and the both of us have the same surname, Zhong, why don't you follow behind me later on, and I'll show you around. If there's anything you don't recognize or know of, you can ask me. We are all master teachers, and as your senior in the field of appraising, it's only right for me to offer you a few pointers here. Hopefully, my words will be of some help to you in pushing for a breakthrough to 6-star. I'll be counting on you then, Zhong Xian replied. It did not seem like the other party had any bad intentions in mind, so Zhong Xian did not think that there was any need to create unnecessary acrimony between them. There's no need to stand on ceremony. While I am a master teacher as well, I have devoted quite a bit of my time to studying appraising, and I do have some reputation of my own in the Qingyuan Empire Appraisal Hall as well, Zhong Jiuxiao replied calmly, but the slight hint of pride in his tone was unconcealable. He had been feeling rather traumatized by the other party after the affairs at the heart-tempering bridge, so he could not help but feel exceptionally refreshed after returning the favor. Zhong Xian nodded. He was just about to speak when Wu Shi and guild leader Mu suddenly both turned their sights over, and the latter spoke with a smile on his face. I was too busy speaking earlier that I forgot to introduce him to you both. As all of you are master teachers, I believe that I need not specially introduce him. Zhong Jiuxiao over here has studied appraising under me for 3 years, and within this short period of time, he has already achieved 7-star proficiency in the occupation. His talent in this field is truly fearsome, an outstanding youth indeed. Wu Shi nodded upon hearing those words before saying, Guild leader Mu, this young man over here is my friend, Zhong Xian. Don't underestimate him just because of his young age, he's truly an exceptional genius. He was previously intending to look for you to take the appraiser examination, but since we coincidentally met one another here, I thought that it would be good to introduce him to you. Your friend? I thought that he is your junior. Guild leader Mu was taken aback. Wu Shi was almost 800 this year, so he had automatically assumed that the 20-year-old lad whom he had brought with him to the appraisal convention would be a new student that he had accepted recently or a close junior. Who would have thought that the other party was his friend instead? The fact that Wu Shi chose to address the young man as his peer showed how high an evaluation he had of the other party's capability. Principal Zhong is a man of great talent. It's already a great honor for me to have him as my friend, so how could he possibly be my junior? Wu Shi quickly waved his hand to deny the claim. The young man before him was a celestial master teacher and a celestial saint. To be honest, he already felt as if he was being a little conceited to address the other party as his friend, so he nearly died of a heart attack when guild leader Mu asked if the other party was his student. Oh! Noting that his old friend was not say those words out of humility, guild leader Mu could not help but take another good look at Zhong Xian, and the casual attitude he took before slowly turned into graveness. A friend of Wu Shi is a friend of mine too. Principal Zhong, feel free to look for me if you ever require any help concerning appraising. Having known Wu Shi for many years, guild leader Mu knew that the other party was an austere man who viewed formalities with grave importance. The fact that he was willing to address a person as young as Principal Zhong with such deep respect showed that the latter was no ordinary figure. Zhong Xian clasped his fist and replied, Guild leader Mu, you are being too polite. There's no need to stand on ceremony with me. Wu Shi and I have been close friends for many years, guild leader Mu said with a smile. He turned to Zhong Jiuxiao and said, Jiuxiao, I know that the both of you are around the same age, but since Principal Zhong is a friend of mine, you will have to address him as senior uncle. All right, hurry up and greet him. Zhong Zhouxiao nearly vomited blood. He reluctantly voiced those two words from his mouth. Senior. Uncle. It was just a moment ago that he had said that he would show the other party around the appraisal convention to teach the other party a thing or two. His face turned so red that it looked as if he would burst into flames at any moment. UN Guild Leader Mu nodded. Wu Shi and Brother Zhong, it seems like most of the guests have arrived. Allow me to bring you two to your seats. All right. Wu Shi nodded. Thus, the group began making their way into the hall. The hall spanned roughly 30 meters from one end to the other, and there was a long rectangular table stationed at the very center. Both ends of the tables were already surrounded with all kinds of finely dressed gentlemen and ladies, and most of them seemed to be roughly around the age of Guild Leader Mu. Zhong Xian spotted two familiar figures amid the crowd, Guild Leader Wan of the Spirit Awakener Guild and Guild Leader Wei of the Terpsichore Guild. Guild Leader Mu first brought Wu Shi and Zhong Xian to their seats before heading to the principal seat of the rectangular table and gestured to them. All right, please take a seat. Yuan Zhong Xian and Wu Shi sat down side by side. Zhong Zhouxiao also walked up to one of the seats as well, but Guild Leader Mu frowned at that moment and said, Zhouxiao, you shall stand behind me. Yes. Zhong Zhouxiao's face twitched slightly, but he quickly nodded and took his place behind Guild Leader Mu. He was initially thinking that with his standing as a 7-star appraiser, he would at least be able to vie back some dignity from the other party, but who would have thought that before he could really do anything, he would already be suppressed to the point where he could hardly raise his head before the other party. After settling everyone into their seats, Guild Leader Mu looked at the person sitting on the other end and said, Since everyone is here, my friend over there, can you take out your artifact now? That person was wearing a copper mask, making it impossible to distinguish his facial features. Nevertheless, from his skin, one could roughly tell that his external appearance should be one of a middle-aged man in his late 40s. Everyone present here is a reputable figure of Qingyuan City, and I see that even Vice Pavilion Master Wu is here today, so naturally, I have no qualms regarding your credibility. However, I think that there is still a need for me to put the ugly words at the forefront and make my stand clear. I only wish for my artifact to be appraised so as to decipher the secret hidden within it. Regardless of what is discovered in the process, I wish to make it very clear that I have no intentions of selling my artifact to anyone else. However, be assured that I will handsomely reward those who help me in deciphering it, the copper-masked figure said. His voice was slightly scratchy, a sign indicating that he had intentionally altered his voice so that no one would be able to recognize him. Rest assured, the friends that I have invited to the appraisal convention this time around are trustworthy individuals. Guild Leader Mu nodded. The copper-masked figure nodded. UN, I trust Guild Leader Mu's judgment. He flicked his wrist, and a scroll appeared in his hands. He unfurled it carefully, and a beautiful scene opened up before everyone's eyes. A lush mountain peak filled with the cries of birds and beasts alike was paired with a tranquil flowing river. It was a calming sight. The crowd found themselves unable to distinguish whether the sight before them was true or not. It was as if a mountain was truly erected not too far from where they were, and they could even vaguely feel a warm, humid breeze on their faces. This is evocative vividness, the work of an 8-star painter. Upon seeing the painting, an elder rose to his feet in agitation. His eyes reddened, and his body trembled uncontrollably. Putting together the fact that he was wearing the robe of a painter and the 7 gleaming stars on his painter emblem, it was likely that he was the head of the painter guild whom Wu Shi had spoken of previously. Evocative vividness? Zhong Xian asked in confusion. Evocative vividness is the ability of an 8-star painter. Those who have achieved this realm are able to produce paintings that are extremely lifelike, making it extremely difficult to discern it from reality. A painting that has achieved such a level is capable of absorbing spiritual energy in order to sustain the spirit within and even cultivate. With sufficient time, it might even be able to leap out of the painting and exist as an independent life form. Wu Shi explained with a suppressed voice. So formidable? Zhong Xian was astonished. He discreetly activated his eye of insight in order to assess the painting before his eyes closely. Chapter 1165. The proud Zhong Jiuxiao. Without taking a closer look at the painting, it would appear as if one was watching the scenery through one's windows, a little distant but nevertheless clear. Through the eye of insight, Zhong Xian was able to perceive the details of the painting with greater clarity, and to his shock, he found that he was able to even perceive the veins of every single leaf in the painting. It's almost as if it's real. Zhong Xian was astonished. Even to him, the painting was extremely lifelike. That was truly fearsome. If one were to hang it on a wall, those who passed by it would never think that it was a painting. Instead, they would view it as a real window. Zhong Xian examined the painting from the top to the bottom, and a deep frown surfaced on his forehead. But it doesn't seem like there's any seal on this painting. The copper-masked figure had said earlier that there was a seal on the painting, but even with the eye of insight was activated, he was still unable to see what was amiss about the painting. It seems like my cultivation is still too low. I am still able to see through paintings of the 7th level with my current skills, but paintings of the 8th level are still a little beyond me. Zhong Xian shook his head. Even though his eye of insight had been upgraded after undergoing the 4th acknowledgement of the Celestial Master Teacher, it was a pity that his cultivation was still simply too low, being at only Saint 2 Dan. A painting of the 8th level was produced with the might of a leaving aperture realm expert. As such, even with the eye of insight, it was not surprising that Zhong Xian could not see through anything at all. Is there a seal on the painting? Such a lifelike painting, it is apparent that it is infused with the essence of evocative vividness. If there's truly a seal on it, what could it possibly be sealing? I have no idea either. However, since the other party was willing to bring out such a valuable painting to have it appraised in public, he must have noticed something peculiar about it. Zhong Xian was not able to notice what was wrong with the painting, and the others in the room also had confused frowns on their foreheads. With hushed voices, they discussed the matter among themselves, unable to figure out what was wrong. At this moment, the perplexed guild leader Mu stood up and asked, "May I take a closer look?" "Feel free," the copper-masked figure said nonchalantly. "Thank you." Guild leader Mu walked up to the painting before whipping out a magnifying crystal ball. After which, he began examining the painting bit by bit carefully. As he was the most capable appraiser in the room, the others waited with bated breaths for his conclusion, fearing that they would interrupt his work. A moment later, guild leader Mu turned a doubtful gaze toward the copper-masked figure and asked, "Friend, can you tell us where exactly the seal is located or what form it takes? This way, we can be spared from making blind guesses here and there and focus our attention on deciphering it instead." Upon hearing those words, the copper-masked figure replied with a hint of disappointment in his voice, "Guild leader Mu isn't able to tell. If the other party could not even discern the seal, how could he possibly be able to decipher it? Allow me to take a look." The head of the Painter Guild also stood up and walked toward the painting in order to assess it more closely. The method by which a painter examined a painting was very different from that of an appraiser. Instead of taking out a crystal ball to scan the details of the painting, the head of the Painter Guild took out a brush instead and began drawing in midair. Noting the look of confusion in Zhong Xian's eyes, Wu Shi explained telepathically, he's trying to comprehend the intentions of the painter through retracing his painting process. "I see." Zhong Xian nodded. In a sense, this was similar to backtracking. By backtracking on the painting process, one would be able to better analyze the focus of the painter when they was working on it, and through so, one could deduce their intentions and discern the location of the seal, assuming that it existed in the first place. As the head of the Painter Guild analyzed the painting process, the frown on his forehead seemed to gradually tighten. A while later, he turned around to explain his findings. The painting flows fluidly, and there is not a single inconsistency to be found in the painting. To put it simply, the painting was completed in a single seating and is wholesome. A seal on a painting would have introduced some incongruous factors to it, affecting its overall impression, but that isn't the case with this painting over here. Hearing the evaluation of the head of the Painter Guild, the copper-masked figure flung his hands furiously and harumphed in displeasure. "If there was no seal on the painting, do you think that I would go through so much effort to invite all of you here? Do you think that I am doing this just because I have too much time on my hands?" He had thought that with all of the top figures of Qingyuan City gathered together, they should be able to discern the anomaly in the painting in a single look. However, from the looks of it, it seemed like he had overestimated their capabilities. It seemed like an 8th-level painting had truly exceeded the caliber of the Qingyuan Empire. "Allow me." Wu Shi stood up and walked over. Not too long later, he shook his head and returned to his seat. With his eye of discernment, he could tell that there was something extraordinary with the painting, but he could not discern where the supposed seal was at all. Very soon, everyone within the room had already taken a look at the painting, but they shook their heads helplessly. Seeing that the crowd was gradually becoming impatient, guild leader Mu waved his hand and said, "All right, friend, we won't get anywhere at this rate. We might be unable to tell where the seal is, but with the wisdom of the masses, we should still be able to offer some useful input on the matter and possibly unravel the seal that you speak of. You should just tell us where the seal is." From the looks of it, it seemed like the seal was very exquisitely hidden, and it would require careful examination over long periods of time in order to discern where it was. Instead of wasting their time on this, it would be more efficient for the other party to just reveal where it was so that they could begin working on deciphering the seal. All right then. Seeing that no one was able to discern where the seal was located, the hint of disappointment in the eyes of the copper-masked figure deepened. Perhaps it was because he had no better solution than this. He sighed deeply and nodded before pointing to the clouds at the bottom of the mountain. "The seal is hidden amid the cloud. If I'm not mistaken, there's a painting that lies beneath the clouds, and there is some kind of secret concealed within it. However, I am unable to figure out how the clouds can be removed from the painting," the copper-masked figure said. "The clouds?" The crowd swiftly turned their gazes back to the painting. The painting depicted a mountain range with towering peaks that shot beyond the clouds. The middle portion of the mountains were mostly concealed amid bundles of drifting, wispy clouds. They had thought that it was just a detail of the painting, but it was actually the seal. Intrigued, Zhong Xian also examined the clouds with his eye of insight, but he was unable to discern anything peculiar about them. After examining the painting for a moment, the head of the Painter Guild couldn't help but ask, "How can you be certain that the clouds are the seal?" The crowd also swiftly turned their gazes over. Shaking his head, the copper-masked figure instructed, "Bring me a torch." An appraiser standing by the entrance of the hall backed out of the room, and a moment later, he returned with a torch. The copper-masked figure took the torch and lightly placed it against the painting. Under the searing flames of the torch, the mountain range was dyed in an orange glow, and the lush greenery was swiftly reduced to ashes. Only the clouds remained as they were. This. The head of the Painter Guild narrowed his eyes in astonishment. For only the clouds to remain unaffected by the flames of the torch, that means that the clouds were not part of the original painting. Judging from the effect, I deduce that there was an interval of at least 30 years between the completion of the painting and the addition of the clouds. How could I have failed to notice it? Under normal circumstances, if the painting was truly wholesome, any change to the painting should have affected its entirety. Yet, for only the clouds to remain unaffected by the flames of the torch, it meant that the clouds had been added a significant period after the completion of the rest of the painting. If that was the case, it was understandable why the copper-masked figure would view it to be a seal. The brushstrokes for the painting of the clouds must have been slightly more forceful in order to allow it to blend in better with the rest of the painting, thus making it harder to notice one. However, considering how wholesome the painting remained even after the addition of the clouds, it stands to reason that they were added in by the original painter himself, Guild leader Mu interjected. The crowd nodded. Only the original painter could possibly add clouds into the painting without introducing any incongruous factors into the painting. But, even if we know that the clouds are the seal, there is no way we can remove them. The crowd fell silent once more. Even if they knew that the clouds were added after the completion of the painting and that they were likely a seal, they had no way of separating the two. After all, the clouds had already fused with the rest of the painting. Seeing that the crowd was still helpless after he revealed the position of the seal, the copper-masked figure shook his head. "It seems like I have overestimated the Qingyuan Empire." Sighing, he was just about to put away the painting when someone suddenly spoke up. "Can you allow me to take a look at it?" The copper-masked figure raised his gaze and saw a young man walking toward him. The young man was none other than Zhong Xian. He was also a little intrigued by the painting, and since the others were unable to discern anything peculiar about it, he wanted to take a closer look to see what was going on. However, before Zhongxian could reach the painting, another voice sounded behind him. "You are only a 5-star appraiser, what can you possibly see from the painting? Allow me to do it instead." After which, Zhong Zhouxiao stood up and walked proudly toward the painting. He brushed his finger lightly across the painting and pondered for a moment before saying, "I have seen such 8th-level painting before, and I also know how the seal works." Seeing how confident Zhong Zhouxiao was, the copper-masked figure clasped his fist and earnestly requested, "You know how the seal works? If that's truly the case, I humbly request you to remove the seal on the painting. I'm willing to reward you generously for this favor." This seal is known as the sealing cloud pin. It utilizes a unique method to conceal the layer beneath it without harming the foundation of the painting. If I'm not mistaken, the seal has been imbued with an individual spirit, or else the clouds would have surely fused together with the rest of the painting with sufficient time. Zhong Zhouxiao analyzed confidently. Sealing cloud pin? The copper-masked figure and the crowd turned to look at Zhong Zhouxiao in bewilderment. They had never heard of such a skill before. Zhong Zhouxiao placed his hands behind his back and spoke proudly. "I once witnessed a person undoing this seal back in my clan, so I know how it can be deciphered." "Your clan? You don't know?" The #1 genius of Qingyuan City is actually an offspring of a sage clan, the Zhong clan. An offspring of the Zhong clan? That explains a lot. With a background like his, even if he's just from the side family, he's bound to have seen things that we can hardly imagine ourselves. Hearing that Zhong Zhouxiao had a way to decipher the painting, an excited commotion broke out amid the crowd, and many looks of admiration were centered on him. Upon hearing that the other party was from the Zhong clan, the copper-masked figure froze for a brief moment before clasping his fist to ask, "So, how should the sealing cloud pin that you spoke of be deciphered?" "Simple. In order to resolve the seal, we have to find an individual who specializes in soul arts. Using his soul as a medium, we will draw out the spirit harnessed within the clouds." "An individual who specializes in soul arts?" the copper-masked figure asked doubtfully. "Indeed. Once the spirit harnessed within the seal is drawn out, we'll be able to remove the seal easily," Zhong Zhouxiao said. The copper-masked figure hesitated for a brief moment before asking, "May I know how skilled the individual must be in soul arts?" "That individual must have fine control over their soul, and their soul must not be too strong. Otherwise, that might cause severe damage to the painting, turning the 8th-level painting into a piece of scrap paper. More importantly, that individual must know where the spirit is concealed, so he must have a deep understanding of painting." "This?" The copper-masked figure was stunned. "Where in the world can we find a person like that?" It was easy to find individuals to satisfy a single one of the conditions, but to find one that satisfied all 3 conditions. Was there even such a person in Qingyuan City? Zhong Zhouxiao chuckled. There's no need to look any further. Standing upright, he emanated a lofty but valiant air, reminiscent of a true hero. "I happen to fit the criteria." Chapter 1166, Durianzhu. The eyes of the copper-masked figure lit up, and he unwittingly clenched his fists tightly by his side. The crowd was also astonished to hear those words. "That's right," Zhong Zhouxiao said confidently as he tilted his head upward. At this moment, he felt as if he had really soared into the 9 heavens. He couldn't even begin to describe how deeply indignant he felt when he saw that Zhongxian was granted a seat when he, the #1 genius of Qingyuan Empire, had to remain standing before others. Now that he finally had a chance to stand up and shine, he could hardly hold back his excitement. "Zhongshe, I beseech you to help me remove the seal from the painting." The copper-masked figure clasped his fist and said. At this moment, he had put down the haughty attitude that he had maintained even before Wu Shu and the others. "Rest assured," Zhong Zhouxiao said confidently as he made his way over to the painting. He whipped his brush before pausing for a brief moment. After which, he suddenly turned his head around and said, "Zhongshe, I might have to trouble you to help me grind some ink for me." Zhongxian turned to glance at his sides to see whom Zhong Zhouxiao was talking to, but the latter's intent gaze on him seemed to suggest that he was the chosen one. Taken aback, he asked in bewilderment, You are talking to me? Indeed. I will have to focus my attention on resolving the seal, so I earnestly require your help for this matter. You wouldn't turn down my request, right? Zhong Zhouxiao said with a faint smirk on his lips. Back at the heart-tempering bridge, the other party had outdone him so utterly that he couldn't even keep his head up in public anymore. Not to mention, just a moment ago, he was forced into calling the other party senior uncle. This was a rare chance for him to strike back, so naturally, he was going to make full use of it. He was going to show the other party that a genius like him wouldn't be outmatched by just anyone. Very well then. Zhong Xian could easily see through Zhong Zhouxiao's intentions, but he still chose to agree to the matter with a nonchalant shrug. In the first place, it wasn't any big deal to be grinding some ink for the other party. Besides, he was interested in the 8-star painting as well, and he was curious to see if Zhong Zhouxiao would really be able to break the seal or not. Thus, he walked up to Zhong Zhouxiao, whipped out an inkstone from his storage ring, and began grinding some ink carefully. Yuan, seeing the young man before him working obediently without daring to utter a single word of complaint, Zhong Zhouxiao felt indescribable exhilaration rushing through his veins. Taking a momentary breather to calm himself down, he dabbed his brush into the ink before tapping it lightly on the painting. Wang. Contrary to expectations, the ink on the brush didn't blot the painting. Instead, it floated in midair, covering the white clouds in the painting. Suspended imagery. Under Zhong Zhouxiao's skillful movements, it took only a few instants for another layer of clouds identical to those on the painting to appear above it. After that was done, he scrutinized the clouds carefully, probably attempting to identify the location of the spirit infused amongst the clouds. Then, with a casual wave of his hand, he retracted the ink back into the inkstone before focusing his soul energy into the painting. Chem. His soul energy is exceptionally pure. He must have cultivated some kind of secret art relating to the soul. Zhong Xian noted. While the other party's soul was nothing compared to him, it still stood out among other cultivators. Based on Zhong Xian's analysis, it was likely due to the cultivation of some sort of secret art from the Zhong clan. For a clan with as powerful as the Zhong clan, even its side family was not something that ordinary clans could hope to match. Be it the things that one could see there, or the secret arts that they had in their possession, they were truly nothing short of extraordinary. With such thoughts in mind, Zhong Xian discreetly stretched his hand towards the painting and touched it lightly. Wang. A book immediately materialized in the library of Heaven's Path. Zhong Xian was just about to take a look at it when he suddenly noticed Zhong Zhouxiao's face turning ghastly pale, and cold sweat was pouring down his face. What's wrong? Zhong Xian asked with a frown. At this point, the crowd also seemed to have noticed that something had gone wrong. They could sense that Zhong Zhouxiao's current state wasn't simply due to exhaustion. Peng. Before the crowd could even ask about the matter, a tinge of red abruptly appeared on Zhong Zhouxiao's pale face, and in the next moment, he suddenly staggered back 8 steps before spewing a mouthful of blood. Worried, guild leader Mu immediately rushed up to him. I'm fine. I just didn't expect the spirit in the painting to retaliate so violently. Zhong Zhouxiao shook his head, but halfway through his words, he suddenly realized that the room was bizarrely quiet. He raised his head and saw guild leader Mu staring at him with a look of horror. Perplexed, he asked, "Teacher, what's wrong?" Even if he had failed in undoing the seal, surely the other party didn't have to look at him with such an expression, right? Why your head? There are durians growing out of your head. Guild leader Mu exclaimed in shock. Durians? Zhong Zhouxiao was taken aback by those abrupt words. There is a tail on your bottom as well. Another elder amidst the crowd exclaimed. Ah! Zhong Zhouxiao quickly turned around to look at his bottom, and the sight he saw left his eyes narrowing into slits, and he nearly blacked out on the spot. There was a crimson tail extending from his bottom, and it was extremely furry, reminiscent of green foxtail. At the same time, through his spiritual perception, he also noticed the large spiky lumps that bore a striking resemblance to durians were emerging from his head one after another, and it didn't take long for them to fill his entire head. To make things worse, they were showing signs of flowering. What's going on? Zhong Jiuxiao's face paled in disbelief as he subconsciously took several steps back. At this point, he was already on the verge of insanity. All he had done was to attempt to break the seal on the painting, so why would such an issue suddenly happen to him? From the looks of it, it seems like a plant spirit has taken root within your primordial spirit. Fortunately, it seems to be an ordinary plant spirit, or else the growth of the plants would be much faster than this. Seeing through the root of the problem, Guild Leader Wan spoke up and explained. As a 7-star pinnacle spirit awakener, she had heard of such a situation before. However, it was still rather shocking to see it in person. Plant spirit? What's going on? Zhong Jiuxiao asked anxiously. The situation was really driving him insane. All he had wanted to do was to resolve the seal and bring some dignity back to himself, and yet, before he could achieve anything, such a thing ended up happening to him instead. Durians were actually growing out of his head, and there were already 4 of them now. It is probably the retaliation of the spirit in the painting. You tried to get rid of it, so it got even with you. Zhong Xian shook his head in sympathy. He had seen this situation of Hall Master Xing before as well. He had tried to mend the rift in the other party's primordial spirit through spirit enchanting it, but he failed to destroy the spirit in time. As a result, he ended up bearing fruits on his head and blooming flowers on his bottom. For such a situation to occur with Zhong Jiuxiao at this moment, there was no doubt that it had something to do with the spirit within the painting. Most likely, the latter had attempted to get rid of the spirit, only to get done in himself instead. What do I do? Zhong Jiuxiao's face paled in despair. He was the #1 genius of Qingyuan Empire, the idol of countless young women. How could he possibly walk around with durians on his head? He would become the laughingstock of the town. It's very simple, you just have to get rid of the spirit that has taken root within you. Zhong Xian explained in composure. He had panicked a little when he saw it happen to Hall Master Xing the previous time around, but the past experience had truly tempered his mind well. At this point, he no longer felt anything towards the matter anymore. Get rid of the spirit? How can I get rid of it? Zhong Jiuxiao looked at Zhong Xian anxiously, as if a desperate man clutching onto his final straw of hope. Simple. Bear open your soul to me, and I'll help you check for the spirit and destroy it. Zhong Xian said. Even someone as powerful as Hall Master Xing was unable to deal with the plant spirit by himself, let alone Zhong Jiuxiao. This was already the most effective and easiest way to get rid of the spirit. You want me to bear open my soul to you? That won't do. Zhong Jiuxiao swiftly shook his head. As an offspring of the Zhong clan, he had many secrets concealed within him, especially within his soul. Given such, how could he possibly bare his soul to a random stranger? One must know that baring one's soul was effectively no different from standing completely nude before another. There was no way he could do that. That won't do. I guess that can't be helped then. Let me take a look at what the spirit within the painting is first, and I'll see if I can concoct some kind of medicine that could isolate and kill the spirit within you. Zhong Xian said. It was a little more troublesome, but as long as he could figure out what kind of spirit it was, he was confident that he would be able to concoct a corresponding poison to deal with it. Back then, he had raised it as one of the potential solutions to Hall Master Xing as well, but it was a pity that the latter didn't agree to it. All right. You should go on and take a look at the painting then. Zhong Jiuxiao heaved a sigh of relief upon hearing that he didn't have to bare his soul before urging the other party forward. Zhong Xian nodded nonchalantly before turning his gaze towards the painting. His eyes were fixated on the painting, but his mind had already slipped into the Library of Heaven's Path to take a look at the newly compiled book. After taking a quick look, a frown emerged on his forehead. Did you notice anything? Noticing Zhong Xian's expression, Wu Shi asked in intrigue. Instead of answering Wu Shi's question, Zhong Xian turned his gaze towards the copper-masked figure and asked, "Where did you obtain this painting from? I have only invited all of you over to decipher the seal for me. I don't think that I'm obliged to tell you the background of the painting, the copper-masked figure replied curtly. You're right, you are indeed not obliged to tell me the background of the painting. Zhongxian placed his hands behind his back and replied. The marshlands of the northern meadows is an extremely humid place. An 8-star painting it might be, but having spent 2,000 years in a place like that, it is already permeated with an air of dampness. It's not apparent from a distance away, but it's quite easily discernible at close proximity. Even with his face concealed, the shock of the copper-masked figure was palpable. To be able to deduce the history of the painting just through the slightly damp aura around the painting, wasn't the other party's eye of discernment a little too formidable? Before the copper-masked figure could recover from his state, Zhongxian had already continued, the marshlands of the northern meadows is a treacherous land, but many cultivators still flock there in hopes of stumbling upon treasure. It's not too surprising that you were able to find the work of the sorrowless old man there. There's one thing that I have to concede that you are right about. It's indeed suspicious that the sorrowless old man would suddenly conceal what he has drawn within the mountains 30 years after he has created the work. Judging from that in itself, it must have been quite a huge secret. The eyelids of the copper-masked figure twitched slightly as he narrowed his eyes. It doesn't seem like we are getting anywhere at this rate. If none of you are able to decipher the seal, I'll be taking my painting away with me then. Who says that none of us are able to decipher the seal? Zhongxian spoke up. Since you don't want me to speak about the origin of the painting, I can't be bothered to waste my breath on it either. I'll talk about the painting itself then. The canvas for the painting is specially created by fusing the skin of the emerald horned fish and white reindeer together, and the ink used is a compound between the sapphire stone and golden source water. It's due to the usage of these precious materials that there isn't the slightest wear and tear on it despite spending 2,000 years under damp condition. On the contrary, the artwork is getting more and more lifelike and touching as the years go by. Judging from the changes in the ink color, it seems like it has been 3 years since you unearthed the painting from the ground, and it should have been 2,142 years since the painting is created. Judging by the timing, I stand to believe that it's the work of the sorrowless old man back when he's around 270 years old. When he eventually added the clouds on the painting, he was already close to 300. In other words, the addition of the clouds could very well be the last thing he did before he went missing. As for whether he was killed or kidnapped, there is no way to say for sure now. Everyone was astonished by the analysis. By the side, guild leader Mu couldn't help but widen his eyes in shock. Even he was unable to determine the history of the painting despite examining it for a long time earlier, and yet, the young man was actually able to detail the history of the painting with just a short glance. Wasn't his appraising capability a little too fearsome? On the other hand, the durian head Zhong Zhouxiao's body also staggered upon hearing those words. At this point, he really felt like bursting into tears. Didn't the other party say that he was a 5-star appraiser? On normal days, he wouldn't even spare a second glance to other 5-star appraisers, and yet, why did it feel that the other party was even more formidable than a 7-star appraiser like him? The sorrowless old man had already reached leaving Aperture Realm prior to his disappearance. With his outstanding painting skills, his painting was still able to reach the level of evoking vividness even with the addition of those clouds, making it extremely exceptionally difficult to decipher the seal he has put up. Chapter 1167. The ink slab won't grind itself. Assuming that you are right, what does determining the material of the canvas and the age of the painting have to do with deciphering the seal? The copper-masked figure interjected Zhongxian. There's indeed no direct relation between them, but such analysis allows us to deduce the reason why sorrowless old man has decided to leave behind a seal on the painting, as well as to determine possible flaws and deficiencies in the seal. Zhongxian replied with a smile. To claim that you are able to determine the flaws and deficiencies within a painting through just the age of the painting itself, aren't you being a little too conceited over there? Zhong Zhouxiao tilted his head upward and harumphed. Due to him speaking too forcefully, the durians on his head shook violently, seemingly ready to fall to the ground at any moment. Even though the crowd had remained silent, the looks on their faces showed that they agreed with Zhong Zhouxiao's point of view. Being able to accurately determine the age of painting did prove that one was an outstanding appraiser, But that piece of knowledge had nothing to do with the seal at all. Don't impose your ignorance upon others. Zhong Xian replied nonchalantly. He took a sweeping glance across the room before eventually halting his gaze upon a certain figure. If I'm not mistaken, you are the head of the Painter Guild, right? Indeed. My name is Meng Chong. Guild leader Meng stood up and clasped his fist politely. Guild leader Meng, pardon for troubling you, but may I ask what kind of painting style was in trend in the Qingyuan Empire Painter Guild 2000 years ago? What kind of brushstroke was preferred then? Zhong Xian asked. This. Guild leader Meng contemplated for a moment before replying. 2000 years ago, the painting style that was popular within Qingyuan Empire was the anchored painting style. This style consists of determining the specific size and outline of the objects within the painting before slowly painting them over a layer after a layer. Usually, one would first spread a layer of ink over the entire paper before slowly painting it on a layer after a layer. Every single layer must be done with utmost preciseness, and the margin of allowed errors is minimal. It is an extremely intensive process, but it allows for the creation of extremely vivid and wholesome painting. Just like anything else, painting styles would also gradually change over the years. Each era had their unique mark which differed greatly from the other. It was based on such differences that allowed appraisers to be able to identify the era which a certain artifact was produced. The anchored painting style was in trend 2000 years ago, and many painters had chosen to adopt that style in their painting. Of them, the most notable figure was definitely the sorrowless old man. It was for this reason that everyone immediately guessed that it was the work of the sorrowless old man when they first saw the painting. Indeed, it's the anchored painting style. Zhong Xian nodded. While the anchored painting style allows for extremely vivid and wholesome paintings, there is a huge downside to it as well. What I need is for the seal to be used in the painting, not an analysis throughout, of the painting, so that the painting remains flat and listen to my words first. Otherwise, they contain the painter would be mocked for his lack of skill. At this point, turned to the copper-masked figure to appease him. However, this painting is what I have said earlier throughout. The sorrowless old man had worked on the painting on two separate occasions, and there was an interval of 30 years for their spiritual perception towards the painting in order to perceive it with greater clarity. The first time that he had worked on it, they nodded in agreement. Based on the standards of the anchored painting style, if the other party had already spoken about it, they might not have noticed this anomaly. In order to conceal some kind of secret, the painting is of equal thickness, old man intentionally added white clouds onto the mountains. Since he was painting over his work then, there should have been a difference in the thickness of the painting between the clouds and the remaining portions. Hearing those words, the crowd turned their attention back to the clouds once more, and a moment ago, bewilderment seeped into their eyes. The painting is of equal thickness throughout, even for the portions with the clouds. How could this be? Such voices could be heard throughout the hall. As spoken by the voices in the hall, the clouds were of equal thickness with the rest of the painting. Just looking at the painting by itself, there was nothing that suggested the painting had been worked on twice. I believe everyone should be able to tell that the painting is of equal thickness throughout. What this means is that he had shaved off a layer of the painting prior to adding on the cloud. Zhong Xian nodded. This. The crowd widened their eyes in disbelief. To shave off the original work and add something different to it. Is this even feasible in practice? The head of the Painter Guild, Meng Chong, expressed his skepticism towards the matter. As a 7-star pinnacle painter, he fully understood the difficulty in pulling such a thing off in practice. Since the sorrowless old man was working with ink, as most painters did, the matter wasn't as simple as simply painting over the previous layer. Ink that had seeped into the canvas from painting the previous layers would affect the new layer that had been painted over, causing unpredictable distortions in the painting over time. Yet, the painting before him showed no distortions of that sort. Theoretically, by careful calculation and fine control of one's brushstroke, it might be possible to pull something as complicated as that off, but anyone with the slightest understanding of painting would understand that it was nigh impossible to carry out in practice. You're right. But what if he were to use suspended imagery on the painting instead? Zhong Xian asked. Suspended imagery? But that would make it a separate entity from the painting. Guild leader Meng Chong replied. Suspended imagery referred to the capability of painting in midair. However, if the clouds were to be painted using suspended imagery, it wouldn't fuse in with the rest of the painting. In other words, if one were to just move the canvas, the two would separate from one another. However, it was clear from the painting itself that the clouds had fused in with the rest of the painting. That would indeed be an issue, but just like what Zhong Zhouxiao had said, a spirit had been infused into the painting. If I were to just make an analogy, if the previous painting and the clouds are two different sheets of paper, the spirit would be the binding factor between them, allowing them to fuse without interfering with one another. Zhong Xian nodded. I see. The crowd came to a realization. They were still a little confused previously when Zhong Zhouxiao said that there was a spirit within the painting, but after listening to the explanation, they finally understood what was going on. But after all you have said, haven't you come to the same conclusion as me? Zhong Zhouxiao harumphed. He was still wondering what kind of astounding theories the fellow would come up with, but after going one big round, the other party still ended up stumbling on the same conclusion as him. That isn't really the case. Zhong Xian said. You have accurately identified the presence of a spirit within the painting, but do you know the reason behind it and how it can be dispelled? Zhong Zhouxiao's face turned crimson upon hearing those words. The only reason why he knew that there was a spirit within the painting was because he had once witnessed an elder deciphering something similar back in his clan. As for the reason why a spirit was infused into the painting and how one could resolve the issue, he was honestly not too sure. If he had truly understood the issue, he wouldn't have ended up sprouting durians on his head either. Since there is a spirit binding the two, it is nigh impossible to separate them. If one were to do it forcefully, it might even result in the destruction of both paintings. To make an analogy, that is equivalent to attempting to tear apart two pieces of paper which have been bound together with glue for several thousand years. Even one were to succeed in pulling them apart, would the remains of the painting still be discernible? Turning his attention away from the conceited Zhong Zhouxiao, Zhong Xian continued his analysis. Hearing those words, the face of the copper-masked figure twitched slightly before falling silent. His purpose of undoing the seal was to find out what was hidden beneath the clouds. As such, it would be pointless to him if the layer beneath were to be destroyed as well in the midst of separating the painting from the clouds. After a moment of silence, the copper-masked figure turned to Zhong Xian and asked, Zhongshe, is there a way to separate the clouds while ensuring that the painting remains intact? Since the young man was able to make sense out of the situation, perhaps, he might just be able to accomplish what others had failed at. Since I walked up here and said so much, naturally, I am confident in resolving the issue. Zhong Xian replied with a smile. Oh, I beseech you to enlighten me. The eyes of the copper-masked figure lit up upon hearing Zhong Xian's words, and he quickly clasped his fist earnestly. It's actually rather simple. Zhong Xian nodded. If the sorrowless old man had used any other binding factor in order to fix the clouds to the painting, it would have been truly difficult to separate the two. However, since he had chosen to use a spirit instead, it actually plays to our advantage. The spirit infused into the painting is similar to a plant spirit, it would only develop or act in very specific manners. In this case, it would be to bind the two parts of the painting together. In essence, it wouldn't be wrong to say that the spirit possesses no sentience. I believe that Guild Leader Ron should be aware of it as well. Guild Leader Ron nodded. Most plants possessed spirit, which controlled their intake of nutrients to facilitate their growth. However, unlike the animal spirits, they didn't have a sense of self, which disallowed them from roaming around freely and averting disasters on their own accord. It was due to the lack of sentience that the spirit was able to sustain the monotonous work of binding the two paintings together for 2,000 years. Thus, if I were to grant the spirit sentience, do you think that it'll still be able to carry out its job as well? Zhong Xian said with a smile. If the spirit is granted sentience, it'll view the clouds above the painting as a tumor plaguing the painting, rendering it extremely uncomfortable. It would surely struggle to get rid of the clouds above it. That seems to be the case, but granting sentience to the spirit wouldn't be an easy task, would it? It doesn't seem like it would be easy to pull that off. With a direction pointed out for them, the eyes of the crowd lit up. However, at the same time, they had also come to a bottleneck as well. Enchanting spirit into a weapon was easy, But granting sentience into a spirit which had laid dormant for more than 2,000 years was clearly something not as simple. It's indeed something not too easy to carry out in practice, but I happen to be able to do it. Zhong Xian smiled. Zhongshe, I implore you to help me. If you are able to do so, I'll surely reward you handsomely for this. The copper-masked figure bowed deeply to Zhong Xian. Previously, he had thought that the crowd of Qingyuan Empire was inept, being unable to even discern the presence of the seal of the painting. However, after hearing Zhong Xian's analysis, he couldn't help but find himself in awe of the other party. To be able to find the root of the problem within such a short period of time and deduce a feasible solution to it, his wisdom and eye of discernment were indeed extraordinary. Rest assured, I'll help you on this matter. However, I still need to make some preparations beforehand in order to ensure that the painting wouldn't be damaged in the process. Zhong Xian said. Of course, of course. The copper-masked figure nodded. May I know what Zhongshe requires? If there's anything that requires my help, I'll try my best to satisfy your needs. Speaking was always easier than doing. If it was so easy to decipher the seal, he wouldn't have been helpless before the painting despite having obtained it for so many years. I don't need anything for the time being. Zhong Xian replied with a shake of his head. He paused for a brief moment before flicking his wrist and taking out a brush. After which, he explained, it would be difficult to enchant the painting as it is. In order to do so, I would have to either destroy the conception of the painting or carve an opening in it so as that I can extend my consciousness into it. However, doing so would inevitably cause some damage to the painting, so I would like to seek your pardon regarding this issue. Don't worry, feel free to do anything that you deem necessary. What he truly valued was the secret hidden beneath the seal. In his view, no matter how valuable the painting was, it couldn't be more important than what lay beneath. That would be great. Heaving a sigh of relief, Zhong Xian was just about to dab the brush in his hand into some ink when he suddenly halted for a brief moment. Then, he turned around to look at Zhong Zhouxiao and bellowed. What are you waiting for? The ink slab won't grind itself. Chapter 1168, Kong Shi's Silhouette You. Hearing that bellow, Zhong Zhouxiao's body staggered, and he nearly vomited blood. It was just a moment ago that he had asked the other party to grind some ink for him, and in the blink of an eye, the favor had been returned to him. This face slap had come way too quickly. Overwhelmed with agitation, a durian from his head plopped to the ground. Zhong Zhouxiao was just about to give Zhong Xian a tongue lashing when the other party's voice sounded once more. I will have to focus my attention on resolving the seal, so I require your help with this. For something as important as this, surely you won't turn down my request, right? Zhong Zhouxiao's face immediately turned black. All the words that he had intended to say choked up in his chest, rendering him completely speechless. It seemed like those were the words he had said to the other party before. He had just stood majestically before the crowd, as if a hero paving the way forward, but now, with their identities switched all of a sudden, he suddenly felt a stinging pain on his face. Karma really comes around. As frustrated as Zhong Zhouxiao was, he knew that the other party was getting back at him for what he had done earlier. Even though he was extremely furious, he still obediently stepped forward and began grinding some ink. Seeing that, Zhong Xian nodded in satisfaction. To be honest, he was not one to bear grudges. That was because he never had to remember one. He could sense the other party's hostility toward him, and since that was the case, there was no need for him to act like a good man any longer. Not to mention, a person from the Zhong clan was planning to take Luo Ruoxin as his bride. One must know that even Feng Zun had nearly died from his hands just by confessing to Luo Ruoxin. While he had no idea where the Zhong clan was and did not yet have the strength to get them for that matter, that did not stop him from obtaining a small down payment first. After Zhong Zhouxiao was done grinding the ink, Zhong Xian was just about to begin painting to destroy the conception of the painting so that he could extend his consciousness in when a thought suddenly came to him. He turned to Guild Leader Meng Chong and asked, Guild Leader Meng, do you have any 7-star painting books on you? I need as many of them as possible. I intend to quickly browse through them in order to analyze where I should enchant the spirit to minimize the damage to the painting. You want to browse through painting books right now? Not expecting the young man to request books from him at this crucial moment, guild leader Meng was taken aback for a moment before shaking his head. I don't have many books on me at the moment. However, if you really need them, the Painter Guild just happens to be located in the vicinity. I can fetch some for you right now. I'll be troubling you then. Zhong Xian clasped his fist and bowed. There's no need to stand on ceremony, guild leader Meng Chong replied before walking out of the room. Not too long later, he returned to the hall, and with a flick of his wrist, a huge pile of books appeared before him. All in all, there seemed to be several dozen thousand of them. As the head of the Painter Guild, he had the right to take the books in the Painter Guild out at his whim. He had not been too sure which books Zhong Xian required, so to be safe, he had taken most of the books and brought them over. Zhong Xian walked up to the pile of books and swiftly swept over them with his gaze. After which, he picked up one of them and casually flipped through it as he delved his consciousness into the Library of Heaven's Path. 7-star Heaven's Path Paint Art. Zhong Xian smiled in satisfaction before flipping through the book in his hand. It was based on the astounding prowess of the 6-star Heaven's Path Paint Art that Zhong Xian was able to pull off suspended imagery. In truth, he had never gathered the required books to learn the 7-star Heaven's Path Paint Art before. A short hour later, he had managed to fully comprehend the essence of the 7-star Heaven's Path Paint Art. Exhaling deeply, Zhong Xian finally placed down the book in his hands. At this moment, his comprehension of painting had already reached the level of 7-star pinnacle, which was comparable to most 8-star primary painters. Zhongshe, can we start now? The copper-masked figure asked anxiously. The young man before him had picked up an unimpressive-looking book among the huge pile and dazed off for a whole hour. This period of time had felt like an eternity to him, and it was more than enough to turn his anticipation into anxiety. I'm done. Nodding confidently, Zhong Xian took in a deep breath before making his way toward the painting. Activating his eye of insight once more, he took another good look at the painting before him. If the painting had been a complete enigma to him a moment ago, with the flaws he had seen in the Library of Heaven's Path and his enhanced understanding of painting at the moment, he was already able to see roughly what was going on with the painting, and many aspects that had bewildered him previously had become clear. I'm going to start now. Without wasting any words, Zhong Xian dabbed his brush lightly into the inkstone, soaking it with ink. After which, he positioned his brush carefully before moving it majestically. Hoo. In the blink of an eye, a painting appeared right before everyone's eyes, floating peacefully in midair. What profound suspended imagery this is, guild leader Meng remarked with a mix of astonishment and awe. The unskilled revel in the commotion while the experts assess the mastery. One Zhong Zhouxiao had pulled off suspended imagery previously as well, but he had only brought out the bare basics of its capability. On the other hand, the young man before him had managed to infuse a beautiful conception on top of the suspended imagery, a clear indication that he had achieved incredible mastery in the way of painting. Profound. Guild leader Mu was surprised to hear that guild leader Meng had such a high opinion of Zhong Xian. He could not help but ask in curiosity, how does he compare to you then? To tell you the truth, even I wouldn't be a match for him. Every single stroke of his suspended imagery further enhances the artistic conception that he's trying to build, allowing him to create a painting so vivid that it feels as if it will leap out at any moment. He has already accomplished a level of mastery very close to that of an 8-star painter, guild leader Meng said with a look of helplessness. As reluctant as he was to admit it, the fact was that the other party's proficiency in painting was far higher than his. It was no wonder he was able to see through the crux of the painting in a single look. In the Qingyuan Empire, there was probably no one who could compete with him. Upon seeing this sight, Zhong Zhouxiao's eyelids began twitching alongside his lips. He felt as if the world had collapsed on him, and he was very close to suffering from a mental breakdown. He could not help but recall how he had said that he would offer Zhong Xian some pointers earlier. At this point, it could not have been any clearer that the other party had already achieved a level far beyond him in both appraising and painting, to say such big words before a true expert. If it was possible for anyone to die of embarrassment, he was probably going to join the list of victims very soon. Hoo. Before everyone's astonished gazes, Zhong Xian finally placed his brush down. A door stood right before his eyes. A door. Why did he draw a door? The view that we are receiving of the 8-star painting is actually similar to looking the scenery beyond a window. While the mountain range in the painting may seem to be in close proximity to us, it's actually another massive world within the painting itself. If one attempted to traverse through the painting with one's consciousness, it would take an eternity to arrive at one's destination. As such, it is imperative to first open up to a door leading to one's destination within the painting prior to extending one's consciousness in. With guild leader Meng's explanation, everyone's initial astonishment swiftly turned into nods of realization. The group that had gathered for the appraisal convention tonight consisted of the top figures of Qingyuan City. While most of them were not painters themselves, they still had a certain degree of understanding of the field. The painting left behind by the sorrowless old man had achieved the level of evoking vividness, and the striking verisimilitude of the painting had left everyone with the misconception that the mountain range in the painting was very close to them. In order to enchant the spirit infused within the painting, it was imperative for one to come into proximity with it first, so a passageway needed to be constructed beforehand. After putting his brush down, Zhongxian placed his hand on the door that he had just painted and pushed it forcefully. Voila! The door swiftly imprinted itself onto the painting. Hong Long. In an instant, the mountain range seemed to suddenly magnify right before everyone's eyes, and the freshly painted door seemed to open a passageway into it. After doing this, Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. He turned to Wu Shi and said, "Wu Shi, I'll be going in now. I'll have to trouble you to protect me." As unlikely as it was for anyone to assault him on this occasion, Zhongxian still felt that it was better to be safe than sorry. "All right." Wu Shi stepped forward and took a position by Zhongxian's side. Reassured, Zhongxian finally took a seat on a ground before extending a sliver of his consciousness toward the door. Upon entering the door, he immediately felt a damp air gushing right at his face. Paying no heed to it, he swiftly traversed forward, and before long, he arrived at the midpoint of the mountain. White clouds covered the mountain peak, making it impossible to see anything beneath it. He extended his consciousness further into the clouds, and in an instant, his surroundings suddenly turned completely dark. He knew that this was a result of the lack of sentience of spirit infused within the painting. Thus, he began to enchant the space. He lit up 20 sparks consecutively before adept fusing them together. At this point, the space was nearly fully lit up, just a breath short from triggering the spirit's sentience. Even so, the light still illuminated the scenery beneath the clouds, and the entire mountain appeared before Zhongxian's eyes clearly. It was a lush mountain forest, not much different from the other parts of the painting. However, at the very center of the mountain, beneath the bright rays of the sun, a vague figure could be seen. Despite his faint silhouette, he emanated an aura that commanded the veneration of others. Upon seeing the figure, Zhongxian's eyes narrowed in astonishment. He had seen the figure before. Kongsha. At this very moment, Kongsha was standing quietly on the mountain, exuding a peaceful and harmonious air. But at the same time, his figure felt a little indistinct, as if his presence was just a mere illusion that would vanish at a touch. This is a sight that the sorrowless old man saw. Zhongxian clenched his fists tightly in agitation. It went without saying that the Kongsha amid the mountain forest was only part of the painting, but the sorrowless old man had accurately captured the distinct aura that Kongsha commanded, and that was not something that one could simply conceptualize from mere thoughts. In other words, it was very likely that the sorrowless old man had seen this sight himself, and too striking a sight it was, he could not resist painting it. Wu Shi said that the sorrowless old man was an untalented individual in his earlier years. It was due to a sudden enlightenment in his 180s that his cultivation and mastery in painting abruptly soared. Is it possible that this was the result from seeing Kongsha's silhouette? Wu Shi had once told him about the history of the sorrowless old man, and his history truly felt like something that had leaped right out from a fantasy novel. For such a massive change to occur to him all of a sudden, there was no doubt that he had stumbled upon a life-changing encounter. Perhaps, it might have been the sight of Kongsha that had granted him sudden enlightenment, allowing him to advance his cultivation and understanding of painting swiftly. Out of gratitude, he had decided to dedicate this painting to Kongsha. However, anything that is related to Kongsha has great implications. He knew that trouble would come knocking on his door should others learn that he had stumbled upon Kongsha's silhouette. Or perhaps, trouble might have already been at his doorstep, so he decisively chose to conceal the secret beneath a layer of clouds. Nevertheless, it still did not stop tragedy from befalling him, Zhong Xian deduced. Having undergone 4 celestial master-teacher acknowledgements, it did not take long for him to connect the dots and make sense of the situation. It was a mystery why Kongsha's silhouette had abruptly appeared in the mountain, but without a doubt, it was bound to be something huge. After all, Kongsha was the world's teacher. All that was associated with him was anything but ordinary. If news leaked to those with malicious intentions, it could very well spell a calamity. As an 8-star painter, a leaving Aperture Realm expert, it was impossible for the sorrowless old man to not know this fact. But ultimately, this was still a masterpiece beneath his brush, and he could not bring himself to destroy it. He had hesitated for 30 years before he eventually decided to seal away a portion of the painting. However, that did not stop death from creeping upon him. If Kongsha's silhouette has appeared in this land, it is very likely that there is a hidden ancient domain similar to the Qiu Wu Palace located in this area. Let me take a closer look. Having thought things through, Zhong Xian quickly made his way toward Kongsha's silhouette. Chapter 1169, Bathing Beauties. The sorrowless old man seemed to have had a clear view of the situation, and that was reflected in his painting as well. Despite being in the world of a painting, the area where Kongsha's silhouette was located was depicted in elaborate detail. Very soon, Zhong Xian arrived at the destination. Before him stood a massive rift with white rocks scattered around the area. The rocks seemed to be made of a rare material that he had never seen before. Zhong Xian was just about to enter the rift to see what was within when Kongsha's silhouette suddenly wavered, and with a light whoosh, he vanished without a trace. Damn it! Zhong Xian's face darkened. He had thought that Kongsha's silhouette would at least be able to last a little longer, but it seemed like he had misjudged the situation. Logically speaking, the silhouette should have been able to sustain itself for a much longer period of time, but the earlier forceful insertion of a door into the painting had destroyed its artistic conception, resulting in the erosion of its evoking vividness quality. Forget it, at least I know about this rift. Now, I just have to figure out where this mountain is located. Once he found out where the mountain was, he would just have to find the rift and venture into it to take a look himself. There should not be many similar mountain ranges in the world, so it would not be too difficult to find it. Just as Zhong Xian was about to fully enchant the spirit and leave the area, a thought suddenly came to his mind. Thinking about it, the copper-masked figure seems to be a little too fixated on destroying the seal. No matter what, this is still an 8th-level painting. It is bizarre that he is going to the extent of destroying an 8th-level painting just to pursue something as elusive as this. I wonder, is it possible that he knows that Kongsha's silhouette is beneath the clouds? In the first place, the copper-masked figure's desire to conceal his identity was a little suspicious in itself. On top of that, he would go to the extent of destroying such a valuable historical work just to find out what lay beneath the seal. Wasn't he afraid that he would destroy a treasure just to obtain something insignificant in return? Did he already know for certain that what lay beneath the clouds was something significant? Regardless, if he sees that Kongsha's silhouette has vanished after the seal is released, he will surely be suspicious about the matter. Zhong Xian fell into deep thought. He could not tell how powerful the copper-masked figure was at the moment, but considering how he dared to act arrogantly before guild leader Mu and the others, it was very likely that he was a powerful expert. If the other party were to learn that he had accidentally caused Kongsha's silhouette to dissipate, would the other party exact vengeance on him for the matter? Considering that this is a matter related to Kongsha, it's best for as few people to know about it as possible. It was best to take caution with anything relating to Kongsha, or else, he could very well end up in the same plight as the sorrowless old man. Since that's the case, perhaps I should make some alterations myself. Zhong Xian pondered for a moment before creating a brush with his consciousness. He leaped into the air and began to paint. At this point, he had no choice but to do this in order to avoid trouble. It did not take too long for him to finish his painting, and he heaved a sigh of relief. He sealed the painting that he had just created where Kongsha had appeared earlier before returning to the clouds to finish the enchantment process. Hong Long. As soon as he lit up the final spark, his surroundings began to tremble intensely. Knowing that he had succeeded in enchanting the spirit, he swiftly retracted his consciousness out of the painting through the door and back into his body. Who? Exhaling a mouthful of turbid air, Zhong Xian opened his eyes once more. Seeing that Zhong Xian had come to, the copper-masked figure quickly rushed forward and asked anxiously, "How is it?" With a pale face and a feeble voice, Zhong Xian replied, "It was difficult, but I managed to successfully pull it off. However, I seem to have overexerted myself in the midst of doing so. If there were 100 concentrated high-tier spirit stones before me at this moment, I would be able to recover a little." 100 concentrated high-tier spirit stones? The mouth of the copper-masked figure twitched upon hearing those words. "I don't have that, but if you have truly helped me unseal the painting, I'll surely compensate you fairly." Even the Qingyuan Empire royal family only had a couple of concentrated high-tier spirit stones in their hands, so how did this fellow manage to ask for 100 of them so unabashedly? On the other hand, hearing that the copper-masked figure did not have any concentrated high-tier spirit stones with him, Zhong Xian sighed in disappointment. Shaking his head, he walked up to the painting and tapped it lightly. "Wake up." Who? Shortly after those words were spoken, the painting suddenly moved. It arched itself backward, as if a person stretching after waking from a long slumber. This. He actually managed to enchant the entire painting? The mouths of the crowd twitched upon seeing this sight. After stretching its back, the painting seemed to slowly scan its surroundings warily before abruptly dashing out. "Humph, where do you think you are going?" With a harumph, the copper-masked figure raised his hand, and the surrounding space was immediately sealed. Half leaving Aperture Realm, Zhong Xian was able to tell the other party's cultivation as soon as the other party made a move. The other party was a half-leaving Aperture Realm expert. It was no wonder the other party dared to snub the many guild leaders and powerful figures gathered within the hall. Upon realizing that its escape route had been sealed, the painting could only return indignantly. "Allow me to negotiate with it," Zhong Xian said. He walked toward the painting and stretched a finger toward it. As the person who had enchanted the painting's spirit, there was a special intimacy between them. As such, the painting did not avoid Zhong Xian's finger. Heaving a sigh of relief, Zhong Xian relayed a thought to it. "Wang." Upon understanding Zhong Xian's intentions, the painting suddenly shook itself, and the clouds shrouding the mountain range abruptly shuddered, as if a tornado was forming within them. The clouds gradually thinned, revealing patches of the world that lay beneath. "It's working." Upon seeing this sight, the eyes of the copper-masked figure and the crowd in the hall lit up in excitement. This was the first time that they had seen such a seal, and to witness it being deciphered right before their eyes, even the calmest of them all could not suppress their agitation any longer. "Jeji, Jeji." As the painting continued shaking itself vigorously, the white clouds on it shuddered more and more vigorously. Before long, unable to withstand the intense shaking, it finally flew off the canvas and fell with a loud splat onto the ground. Seeing that the seal had finally been removed, everyone quickly focused their gazes on the painting, curious to see lay beneath. Even Wu Shi could not help but pay close attention to the painting at this moment. He wanted to see what it was that would leave the copper-masked figure so desperate to decipher the painting. However, what lay beneath the clouds consisted only of lush greenery and glistening lakes. As beautiful as they were, there was nothing particularly noteworthy about them as compared to the rest of the painting. "Wait a moment. What's that?" Someone amid the crowd suddenly shouted at this moment, and everyone quickly turned their gazes over once more. By a rift near the center of the mountain, surrounded by countless bizarrely shaped stones, a natural hot spring could be seen. Several beautiful silhouettes were currently soaking in it delightfully. Too far away, those beautiful silhouettes were extremely blurred. Nevertheless, with but a glance, it was apparent that they were extraordinary beauties. The crowd had been wondering what kind of wondrous artifact or astounding secret would be hidden so securely beneath the clouds. Who would have thought it was a group of beautiful ladies bathing? They could not help but freeze on the spot. It was too unexpected. I get it. The sorrowless old man must have stumbled upon a group of bathing ladies while he was venturing through the mountain range, and in a moment of inspiration, he swiftly painted the scenery before him. However, he soon realized that it was extremely disrespectful of him to peek on others while they were bathing, and ashamed by that encounter, he decided to seal away a portion of his painting. I was wondering why the sorrowless old man would go through so much trouble to put a seal on it and ruin the artistic conception of his masterpiece. So, this is the true reason behind it. Ha ha ha, to be able to paint those bathing beauties with such amazing semblance, the sorrowless old man is indeed a passionate individual. At this point, the crowd could not help but burst into laughter. They had thought that there was bound to be some kind of earth-shattering secret hidden within the painting, considering the effort that the sorrowless old man had put into sealing it away, but surprisingly, what he was trying to conceal was just a dark history. This. Impossible. This can't be. The copper-masked figure exclaimed in disbelief. He had put in so much effort to acquire and decipher the painting, and yet, it turned out to be just a group of ladies bathing. The vast difference between reality and his expectations left him feeling as if his mind would descend into insanity at any moment. There must be another seal within the painting, right? There's no doubt about it, there must be one. The agitated copper-masked figure hurriedly rushed up to the painting and extended the consciousness of his powerful primordial spirit into the painting, wanting to see what had happened. Who? Feeling the immense pressure from the elder before him, the painting leaped in shock. He quickly hid himself behind Zhongxian fearfully. Tell me, is there still a seal within the painting? The eyes of the copper-masked figure turned crimson, and a powerful soul reverberation rippled from his primordial spirit. Enough. Look at how frightened little painting over here is, Zhongxian bellowed as he gently consoled the 8th level painting. After which, he turned back to the crowd and said, just as everyone has seen, the secret lying beneath the seal is a group of bathing beauties. It seems like the sorrowless old man was peeking on others bathing, and unable to find a way to vent his emotions, he decided to pick up his brush instead. While it may seem a little dishonorable, it is perfectly normal for all humans to feel inherently attracted to beautiful individuals. It's actually no big deal at all, so you need not get so agitated. Noting the other party's attitude, it was clear that he knew what actually lay beneath the painting. Facing such a situation, he could not help but heave a sigh of relief for his wise decision back then. If he had not added in the hot spring of beautiful ladies to fill the void, he might have very well given himself away. Pardon me, I was too reckless. Hearing those words, the copper-masked figure took a deep breath and swiftly calmed himself down. After which, he clasped his fist and bowed. Ever since I discovered the presence of the seal, I have been wanting to find out what lay beneath it. Even though the result turned out to be a disappointment for me, I'm still grateful to you all for helping me resolve this lingering regret. Right after saying those words, he flicked his wrist, and a pile of high-tier spirit stones appeared right before him. Even from a rough estimation, there had to be at least 12,000 within the pile. These spirit stones are a token of appreciation for your help. Please, feel free to take them. After saying those words, the copper-masked figure turned to Zhongxian. Zhongshe, I am full of admiration for the astounding mastery you have achieved in the way of painting despite your young age. Here is a book left behind by the sorrowless old man, named The 10 Deciphers of Painting. Detailed within it are the various painting techniques that he is the most skilled in. I hope that this will prove useful to you. After saying those words, he swiftly grasped forward and retrieved the painting before clasping his fist. I'll be taking my leave now. Farewell. Then, without further ado, he stood up and rushed out. In the blink of an eye, he had already vanished from everyone's sight. From the looks of it, it seemed like he feared that others would go after him for the treasure that he possessed, so there was not the slightest hesitation in his movements at all. Looking at the book in his hands, Zhongxian could not help but fall speechless. The other party had mentioned earlier that he would be handsomely rewarded if he were to decipher the seal, but this? What the heck was this? He could not help but feel a little choked up within. Is that really the 10 Deciphers of Painting? Zhongshe, it might be a little presumptuous for me to ask this of you, but will you sell the book to our painter guild? In contrast to Zhongxian's speechless expression, By his side, guild leader Meng's gleaming eyes were completely fixated on the inconspicuous book that Zhongxian held in his hands. The sorrowless old man was the most formidable painter from the Qingyuan Empire. While he had only lived for a short 300 years, he had made great contributions to the Painter Guild, bringing it an era of prosperity. Of the heritage that he had left behind to the Painter Guild, there was one that stood out: the 10 Deciphers of Painting. It was a painting manual that he had begun working on in his later years. However, he had gone missing before he could finish the book, and mysteriously, the book had vanished from the surface of the world as well. The Painter Guild had devoted great resources into finding it, but there was not the slightest clue to be found. Who could have predicted that it would be in the hands of the copper-masked figure, and he would even give it to Zhongshe for free? "You wish to buy the book?" Zhongxian glanced at the book in his hand and instantaneously recorded its contents into the library of Heaven's Path. After which, he tossed it over generously and said, "Since you want it, I'll give it to you." Is this really all right?" stammered guild leader Meng as he caught the book with his trembling hands. "Zhongshe, allow me to thank you on behalf of the entire Painter Guild. You are truly generous to give away a book that is easily worth 50 concentrated high-tier spirit stones just like that. I am impressed." "What did you say? 50 concentrated high-tier spirit stones?" Zhongxian felt as if the world was spinning around him. "Indeed," guild leader Meng replied. "Pardon me, but I won't be giving you the 10 Deciphers of Painting anymore." Zhongxian quickly snatched back the book from guild leader Meng's hands. "Pay up. Meng Chong." The crowd. Chapter 1170. A visit in the night. 1. In the end, guild leader Meng did not pay the 50 concentrated high-tier spirit stones. After all, there was no way he could fork out that much money. After promising to bring Zhongxian around the Painter Guild, he quickly snatched the book back and hid it in his storage ring. Zhongxian could not help but lament how the noble values of the past were gradually eroding with time. "Zhongshe, we didn't contribute much to the unsealing of the painting, so we won't be accepting any of the high-tier spirit stones here," guild leader Mu said as he passed over a storage ring filled with the high-tier spirit stones that the copper-masked figure had left behind. He had gathered everyone here today in hopes of combining the wits of the masses to decipher the secret of the painting, but they had ended up contributed nothing at all. The case ended up being resolved by the sole efforts of the young man before him. While the high-tier spirit stones were the compensation that the copper-masked figure had offered to all of them, they were too embarrassed to accept any. "All right then." Zhongxian initially refused it, but seeing that the crowd was unwilling to accept the high-tier spirit stones, he could only reluctantly take it. Actually, these spirit stones were not of much value to him. However, considering that he could possibly exchange them for concentrated high-tier spirit stones in the future, he chose to take them. At this point, guild leader Mu suddenly stepped forward and remarked, "Zhongshe's capability in appraising is truly exceptional. If I'm not mistaken, you are an appraiser, right?" Considering how the other party had been able to sharply determine the year in which the painting had been created and deduce the solution to deciphering the seal through analyzing its creation method, there was no doubt that he was a skilled appraiser as well. Zhongxian nodded. "That's right. I'm a 5-star appraiser at the moment. Actually, I was intending to pay the appraiser hall a visit to take the 7-star examination, but I haven't yet found the time to do so. With eyes as sharp as yours, there's no need for you to take the examination. I'll apply for a 7-star appraiser emblem on your behalf straight afterward," guild leader Mu replied with a smile. At this point, he could see why even a prestigious figure like Wu Shi would regard the other party as his brother. With the other party's capability, it was clear that he would clear the examination perfectly, so there was no need to waste their time on such formalities. Guild leader Meng also hurriedly stepped forward and said, "I'll apply for a 7-star painter emblem on your behalf as well." Judging just from the suspended imagery that the other party had performed earlier, it was apparent that the other party's proficiency in painting was far above his. Even 7-star pinnacle painters would struggle to be a match for him. Naturally, he was more than qualified to be promoted straight to 7-star. "Thank you." Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed like his trip here was not wasted. Not only did he manage to bring his painting up to the level of 7-star pinnacle, He had even managed to obtain 2 7-star emblems simultaneously. With this, he had finally gathered the supporting occupations required for his promotion to 7-star master teacher. Once all the emblems arrived, he would be qualified to apply for the nomination slot to the Sanctum of Sages. Guild Leader Mu, may I know where the library of the Appraiser Hall is located? Zhongxian asked with a polite smile. If it's possible, I would like to take a look at your books. Since he had already come to the Appraiser Hall, it would be good to take this opportunity to collect all their books into the Library of Heaven's Path as well. Of course, of course. Guild Leader Mu nodded. That isn't a problem at all. He was just about to lead the way forward when a conflicted voice sounded. Teacher, Zhongshe. May I trouble the both of you to help resolve this thing first? It was only upon hearing the voice that the duo suddenly recalled that there was still a certain figure whose head was blooming durians. Over the past hour, Zhong Zhouxiao had flourished well. Another 9 durians, along with a dense congregation of lush leaves, had sprouted on his head, and the tail behind him had grown longer and more bulky, reminiscent of a valiant tiger. Give me a moment. Zhongxian pondered briefly before whipping out a brush and penning down a prescription. He passed the prescription over and said, "Concoct the medicine according to the way I have stated and consume it. It should be able to destroy the spirit within your body. The process will be a little painful, but you must endure it." Since the other party was unwilling to bear his soul open to him, Zhongxian could only resort to poison in order to deal with the spirit. It was fortunate that he had gotten a close glimpse of the spirit earlier when he entered the painting, so he knew what kind of poison had to be concocted in order to kill it. The poison that Zhongxian had prescribed was a relatively simple one, such that even ordinary cultivators would be able to concoct it. However, it was extremely damaging to the body, dealing excruciating pain to those who consumed it. Whether Zhong Zhouxiao would be able to endure the pain or not would be dependent on him. If Zhong Zhouxiao felt that the poison was too dangerous, he could always choose to keep his head of durians. In any case, that would only affect his appearance. It would not make too much of a difference to his physical functions. In fact, his transformation into a plant might even enhance certain functions of his. Considering the fact that the other party was from the clan of his love rival, there was really no reason for Zhongxian to do this for the other party. It was already a great mercy that he had offered this much help in the first place. Thank you. Zhong Zhouxiao took the prescription with a conflicted expression on his face. Nevertheless, he still bowed in gratitude. After dealing with this matter, Zhongxian and Wuxia bade everyone else farewell before following Guild Leader Mu to the library of the Appraiser Hall. Appraisers were valued for their knowledge. In order to be a good appraiser, one had to have some understanding of everything, be it knowledge on other occupations, history, geography. Investigating the background of an artifact was the foundation to determining the authenticity of a certain artifact. As such, there were several dozen million books within the library of the Appraiser Hall. Walking between the shelves, it took Zhongxian 4 whole hours before he managed to collect everything. By the time he was done, it was already late at night. He swiftly compiled the 6-star and 7-star Heaven's Path appraising art and internalized them. Before long, his understanding of appraising had reached the level of 7-star pinnacle. Even without the Library of Heaven's Path or the Eye of Insight, he was able to easily discern most artifacts of Saint Intermediate tier and below without any errors. Returning from the Library of Heaven's Path, he began reflecting on what had happened earlier. This was the first time he had come to an appraisal convention, and it had truly have been a fruitful trip. Not only had he managed to advance his knowledge to the level of a 7-star appraiser and painter and obtain the 7-star emblems of those 2 occupations, more importantly, he had learned that Kongsha's silhouette had once appeared on the peak of a mountain. If there was a chance in the future, he should really investigate this matter. Perhaps, he might be able to uncover something special. Zhongshe. As soon as Zhongxian walked out of the library, he saw Guild Leader Mu walking toward him. Even though it was the middle of the night, it seemed like the other party had not gone to rest yet. There was a young man following behind Guild Leader Mu with a slightly conflicted look on his face, Zhong Zhouxiao. The durian head and tail that had been on Zhong Zhouxiao's body a few hours ago had vanished without a trace, but in place of that, his face and body were slightly swollen. Most likely, That was the after-effect of consuming the poison. The swelling looked a little glaring, but it would swiftly fade after some rest. After trading some pleasantries, Zhongxian clasped his fist and took his leave. A starry night sky welcomed him as he stood outside the appraiser hall. It felt as if someone had used a needle to pierce through the night sky, leaving behind innumerable holes for light to pass through. The bustling streets from a moment ago had become a little cold, with nary a person in sight. Stretching his back lazily, Zhongxian began making his way toward the combat master hall. But before he could get very far, goosebumps suddenly rose all over his body. He could clearly sense that someone was following him, but regardless of whether he used his spiritual perception or his eyes, he was unable to find the other party. Who? Sensing that the person following him was a dangerous individual, possessing strength far beyond him, he swiftly executed the Heaven's Path movement art and dashed forward. In a single breath, he flitted over a distance of 10 kilometers. But despite that, he was still unable to shake off the feeling of being eyed. Anxious, he turned around and saw a black-robed man standing not too far away. For the other party to be able to catch up even though he had pushed his Heaven's Path movement art to its very limit, not to mention the fact that the other party was able to prevent even his spiritual perception from noticing the other party, there was no doubt that the black-robed man standing before him was a true expert. This was the very first time Zhongxian had encountered this situation, and it left cold sweat drenching his back. Nevertheless, he did not panic. He began assessing the figure before him carefully. It was not possible to see the face beneath the other party's black robe, but his very presence seemed to meld into the essence of the world itself, leaving him with an impression that the other party would vanish at any moment. Zhongxian activated his eye of insight to get a closer look of the other party, but he was unable to discern the other party's cultivation at all. In other words, the other party wielded strength beyond the Leaving Aperture Realm Hall Master Xing, or perhaps, beyond the Leaving Aperture Realm even. When did such an expert appear in Qingyuan City? There's no need for you to be so wary around me. If I wanted to kill you, you would have long been killed. It was an extremely deep and resounding voice. As nervous as Zhongxian was, he knew that there was no way he would be able to escape if the other party wanted to kill him. Thus, he clasped his fist politely and replied, "Elder, you were waiting for me." It was shortly after leaving the appraiser hall that he had sensed that the other party was following him, which meant that the other party had probably been waiting for him. But instead of answering his question, the black-robed man placed his hands behind his back and said, "To be able to sense me so swiftly even though I only leaked out a hint of an aura, it seems like you are quite a talented individual. I have been following you since sunset, and I saw how you managed to decipher the seal on the painting. Despite your young age, you have quite a keen pair of eyes. Not bad. You have been here since sunset." Zhongxian narrowed his eyes in alarm. He had been paying close attention to his surroundings all this while due to the happenings with King Zhongqing earlier in the day, and yet, despite his enhanced wariness, he had still been oblivious to the fact that the other party had been following him. This was too frightening. "If I may ask, I would like to inquire why Elder has been following me all night." At the same time, Zhongxian secretly activated his library of Heaven's Path, but no book was compiled. Until the other party executed a battle technique, he would be unable to discern the other party's background. "It's nothing much, I just want to know if you have the qualification and capability for what you seek." The black-robed man harumphed as he finally raised his head, revealing the appearance of an old man in his 60s. It was a foreign face. Zhongxian was certain that he had never seen the other party before. Peng! In the next moment, Zhongxian suddenly felt a choking sensation in his chest, as if some kind of force had struck him. At the same time, the space before him suddenly compressed together, as if someone was forcefully denting it, trapping him in place. As if a caged beast, no matter how he struggled, he was unable to free himself. This. Zhongxian's eyes narrowed further and further. The fact that the Library of Heaven's Path had not compiled a book meant that the other party had not executed a battle technique. And yet, the other party was still able to wield such strength, rendering him completely helpless. Just how strong could the other party be? Saint 5 Dan Pinnacle? 6 Dan? Or was it 7 Dan? In any case, The other party was a figure whom he could not stand a chance against at this moment. Despite knowing the deep danger he was in, Zhongxian knew that the more threatening a situation was, the more he should not panic. Thus, driving his soul depth, he began speaking with a unique aura in his voice. Elder, if you are only seeking me to display your strength, there's really no need for you to do so. I am a mere Saint Dan cultivator. I won't understand it no matter what you show me. The gap between him and the other party was simply too great. The only thing he had that could possibly match the other party was his exceptional soul depth. If he could leave the other party in a short trance, he might be able to buy sufficient time to flee from this situation. However, seeing through Zhongxian as if he was transparent, the black-robed elder chuckled softly. Your soul depth is not too bad, but you're still a little lacking to be using impartation of heaven's will on me. Those words immediately sent chills down Zhongxian's spine. With an earnest smile on his face, he swiftly waved his hand and said, Elder, how could I dare do something as rude as that? It is a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding. To be able to see through his impartation of heaven's will, it seemed like the other party's soul depth was beyond his as well. It was fortunate that he had not recklessly forced his way through. Otherwise, the other party's retaliation could very well have cost him his life. You do have some wits, but it's meaningless against me, the black-robed elder replied indifferently. How could I dare flaunt my little wits before you? Elder, your ability to track me without catching my notice and seal my movements so easily must mean that your soul depth has reached a level far beyond my imagination. If I may request, could you display a battle technique for me? At this point, Zhongxian shook his head and sighed. I have come from a humble place, and I have never met a person as strong as you. I truly respect experts like you, and if you could just accede to this request of mine, my life would be truly fulfilled. Chapter 1171. A visit in the night. 2. The black-robed elder harumphed coldly. Humph, you do have quite a glib tongue. Do you take me as one of those naive, young ladies who fall for your words easily? Naive, young ladies? Falling for my words? Zhongxian hurriedly waved his hands earnestly, denying the accusation. At the same time, an inconspicuous frown surfaced on his head. He could vaguely feel that the black-robed elder was referring to something with his words, but he had always conducted himself properly, never getting involved with any women. What could the other party possibly be getting at? If others were to hear that, they might just think that he was a playboy. I will just get straight to the point with you. With his hands behind his back, the elder slowly closed in on Zhongxian. In that instant, Zhongxian felt as if a massive mountain was slowly making its way toward him, and the immense pressure that he felt seemed to sap the air from his lungs. This pressure weighed on both his mind and his body, rendering him completely powerless. It was apparent that the other party wanted him to know the gap between them and force him to submit. Humph! With narrowed eyes, Zhongxian drove his heaven's pathshanchi, and the pressure on him alleviated significantly. As powerful as the other party was, there was no presence more imposing than the heavens. Interesting. Seeing that the other party was able to endure his pressure so easily, an interested gleam surfaced in the eyes of the black-robed elder. To be able to endure my pressure so easily, you must have some kind of formidable artifact on you. It seems like you have quite a doting teacher there. I am my teacher's only direct disciple, so he does treat me quite well, Zhongxian replied. The other party was too fearsome. With his current strength, he stood no chance at all. Even escape seemed unlikely at this point. Thus, he could only place his hopes in his teacher, Zhongxian, to deter the other party from doing anything overboard. The black-robed elder looked at him and asked, May I know whom your teacher is? Zhongxian nodded. My teacher goes by the name of Zhongxian. Upon hearing the name, the black-robed elder's eyes narrowed menacingly, and he harumphed coldly. Zhongxian? Young man, I still have a rather favorable impression of you. Don't lose it by lying. Suddenly, Zhongxian suddenly felt as if he was standing above a sinkhole and an unknown power would consume him at any moment. Gritting his teeth to withstand the devastating might crushing him, Zhongxian asked, Lying? Elder, why would you say such words? I have met Yang She once, and he has already long retired from worldly affairs. As far as I know, he has never accepted any students, and yet, you say that you are his student. Are you honestly expecting me to believe such words? The black-robed elder said with a threatening edge in his voice. You have met Yang Xian? Zhong Xian's eyebrows shot up in alarm, and for a moment, he found himself in a daze. Yang Xian was a name that he came up with spontaneously back then. In other words, it was a fictional character that he had fabricated. And yet, the black-robed elder was saying that he had met Yang Xian. It couldn't be that there was really a master teacher going by the name of Yang Xian in the world who coincidentally wielded unfathomable strength as well, could there? That would be too much of a coincidence. All right, I have no interest in whose student you are. I am here only to offer you a warning. It's good to dream big, but a human should know his own place and limits. If you attempt to pursue things that are unreachable to you, not only will you bring pain upon yourself, you will also hurt those around you as well. By then, things will not be resolved with just mere words. And I cannot promise that those whom you associate with will remain unharmed in the process as well. Know my place and limits. Pursue things that are unreachable. Zhong Xian was confused as to what the other party was saying. Just as he was about to ask about it, his eyes suddenly widened in astonishment. You are from the Luo clan? The threat, coupled with the previous words about naive, young ladies. Could the other party be Luo Ruoxin's family? Only a clan as powerful as the Luo clan would be in command of experts who could subdue him without using any battle technique at all. The pieces of the puzzle seemed to fit together perfectly. While he and Luo Ruoxin had never told anyone that they had gotten together, it was not surprising that a family as powerful as the Luo clan would be able to uncover that. Quite a keen mind you have there. The black-robed elder harumphed, not denying the matter. With a lofty look on his face, he gazed down at Zhong Xian as if looking at a mere ant and said, by this point, you should be aware that she's the little princess of our Luo clan. She carries heavy responsibility on her shoulders. I advise you not to have any thoughts toward her. Someone like you will never be good enough for the Luo clan. Someone like me will never be good enough. Zhong Xian subconsciously clenched his fists tightly together. Indeed. The Luo clan is one of the top 3 sage clans on the master-teacher continent, and there is no one who doesn't know that our little princess wields immense power. As long as she wills it so, anyone whom she favors will be able to rise to the top of the world. You might have some wits, and your talent isn't too bad either, but if you think that you are qualified to get together with our little princess, I suggest that you take a closer look at yourself. A toad lusting over the flesh of a swan will never end well. The black-robed elder sneered in disdain. Who were they? One of the behemoths of the sage clans, a top-notch power on the master-teacher continent. On the other hand, the other party was just a bumpkin from a remote place. Even if he possessed exceptional talent, he was still nowhere near to matching up to the peak. In the first place, they were existences from 2 wholly different worlds. Who are you to judge my worth? The other party's words left a surge of fury rising in his chest. He could not accept the other party saying that he was not good enough for Luo Ruoxin, and he raised his head proudly and bellowed, so what if you are from a sage clan? A higher starting point doesn't give you the right to look down on others. A day will come when even sage clans like yours won't catch my eyes. So what if the other party was from a sage clan? So what if the other party wielded strength far greater than him at the moment? As a celestial master teacher, he would eventually reach heights that no one had seen before. Perhaps, in a few decades' time, the supposed sage clans would be little more than mere ants before him. Many conceited fools have uttered such words in the past as well, but the Luo clan's position still remains unshakable in this world. The elder harumphed with a cold glint in his eyes. I have met countless talents in the world, and there are plenty whose talents you don't even come close to matching. Yet, there was not a single one of them who managed to shake the Luo clan. So, I advise you not to bring trouble upon yourself. I hate to pull my weight before my juniors or to incur the dislike of our little princess, but if you still don't back down, it's my responsibility to give you a good reason to do so. Hong Long. As soon as those words were spoken, the stars up above suddenly seemed to plummet from the sky. Unimaginable might crushed down on Zhong Xian, threatening to smash him into pieces. Under the overwhelming strength of the power, Zhongxian found himself unable to breathe. As if an ant standing before a giant, he felt utterly vulnerable. "Swear on your identity as a master teacher that you won't see her, and I'll spare you," the black-robed man uttered coldly. Zhongxian felt as if someone was grabbing his neck tightly, and the feeling of death encroaching on him felt more vivid than ever. He struggled with all his might, but he was unable to struggle free. "Damn it. This won't do. At this rate, I might really die." The other party's strength was omnipresent around him. There was nowhere he could escape to. It was as if a guillotine was hanging above him, ready to claim his life at any moment. While the other party had not shown any killing intent yet, he hated the feeling of having his life in the hands of another. It felt as if his entire existence was banking on the whims of another, and he abhorred such a feeling of helplessness. His fingernails sank deep into his flesh, causing a stream of blood to drip down his hands. For the first time, he vividly felt the need for power in this world. Without power, there was truly nothing at all. Dignity, love, master-teacher rank, all of that was meaningless if one did not have absolute power to protect them. Ever since his transcension to this world, things had always gone favorably for Zhongxian. While the situation might have gotten a little dangerous from time to time, he had always been able to overcome any adversity with his wits. This was the very first time he had felt completely helpless and powerless. He could not help but realize that if the person before him harbored malevolent intentions, no amount of words would get him out of this situation. For the first time, he desperately craved greater strength. Only with greater strength would he be able to embrace and protect those whom he held dear. Zhongxian anxiously sent a message to Vicious discreetly. "Vicious, what is the strength of that fellow? Are you able to deal with him?" With his current strength, he stood no chance against the black-robed elder. His only hope lay in the person who had once stood at the very pinnacle of the master-teacher continent. "Master, his cultivation has probably reached Saint Seven Dan. I have yet to recover my true strength, so I fear that I won't be a match for him," Vicious replied with a hint of anxiety in his voice as well. If his master was killed, he would dissipate on the spot as well. This was the effect of the soul contract between them. If he wished to survive, he would have to do his best to ensure the safety of his master. "I have to find a way to make him execute a battle technique. Only with some information on him will I be able to find a way out of this situation," Zhongxian replied, unsurprised by Vicious' response. Saint Seven Dan, that was a level that had nearly reached the peak of the master-teacher continent. With such strength, even the entire Qingyuan Empire would be helpless before him. Vicious was currently only a mere heart and a finger, so it was natural that he would not stand a chance against an expert of the other party's caliber. "I should be able to force him into executing a battle technique, but I fear that my killing intent might be a little too strong. He could easily discern that I'm an otherworldly demon, and that might get you into greater trouble," Vicious replied. Zhongxian gritted his teeth and replied, "I'll give you the permission to devour Kongsha's writing, so do it." Back on the Saint Ascension platform, he had received Kongsha's personal handwriting. Schemed by Lu Feng back at the Master Teacher Academy, a third of it had been consumed for his clone to act as Yang Shi. To deal with Vicious Finger, another one-third of it had been consumed. Thus, only a third of the original text remained in the booklet. This was the last time he could use this card. It was a heavy price to pay, but after consuming Kongsha's writing, not only would Vicious' aura become much stronger, he would also be able to morph his aura into that of a true master teacher, and that was what Zhongxian required to resolve the precarious situation he was in. "All right," Vicious replied. Kongsha's writing, which he had kept in his storage ring, gradually faded line after line, and at the same time, Zhongxian felt a powerful aura surging within him. Boom! The following moment, an aura reminiscent of a rampaging dragon burst into the surroundings, dissipating the power that had gathered in the area in an instant. At the same time, Zhongxian felt the invisible shackles around him vanish without a trace, as if a fish on shore who had managed to make its way back into the water. On the other hand, not expecting the young man before him to suddenly release an aura so powerful that even he was unable to withstand it, the black-robed elder's body stiffened. Not daring to get careless before such a powerful force, he swiftly executed a defensive technique to ward off the aura. Barely after he successfully protected himself from the burst of aura, the young man before him suddenly raised his head to gaze straight at him. Deep within his eyes, ripples reminiscent of a torrential river could be seen. At the same time, a deep and ancient voice sounded. It was spoken in time with the movement of the young man's voice, but eerily, the voice sounded as if it had come from the heavens. When have I grown so weak that even a mere Saint Seven Dan brat dares to threaten my student? Who do you think you are? Chapter 1172, The Engagement Boom. The powerful aura that had burst forth from Zhongxian's body left the black-robed elder feeling as if the heavens and earth had shattered, and the sun and moon had fallen. In that instant, he thought that he had witnessed the end of the world. Under the suppression of the overwhelming aura, the black-robed elder's body froze in fear as his mind whirred to a stop. In just the blink of an eye, it was as if a deity had descended from the heavens. The inviolable aura that the other party emanated had dispelled any thought of retaliation in his mind. Not only so, he felt as if his knees would cave in at any moment, as if his body instinctively wanted to worship the figure before him. It took a while before the black-robed elder could speak once more. With quivering lips, he asked weakly, "You are Yangshe?" "No, that's not right. A will that Yangshe has left behind." For the aura of the young man before him to surge so abruptly, there was only a single possibility. In order to protect his own student, Yangshe had specially left a sliver of his will in the latter's body. Only in the face of absolute crisis would he show himself. "If I didn't appear, were you going to kill my student?" There was no difference in the external appearance of the young man, but it was as if another person had taken control of the body. Be it his disposition or his voice, it was completely different from before. This was especially so for his gaze. Cold, impassive, and unfathomable, as if a lofty deity from the heavens. Before this powerful figure, the black-robed elder dared not move in the slightest. He feared that the slightest movement could instantly bring death upon himself. Even though he was a Saint Seven Dan cultivator, he knew that before those who stood at the very pinnacle of the master-teacher continent, his strength was not even worth a mention. Even the hostile intent from an expert of that caliber was too much for him to bear, let alone facing one in a proper battle. Despite his trembling body, the black-robed elder asked with a hint of doubt in his voice, "Are you really Yangshe?" He had once had the honor of meeting Yangshe, and the latter's voice did not sound like that. On top of that, his aura felt a little different as well. It did not seem likely that they were the same person. "Luo Chengxian, are you doubting me?" The young man took a step forward. Voila! In an instant, the aura intensified, and the surrounding air crackled furiously. It was as if even the world was unable to withstand the overwhelming strength emanated by the young man before him. "I dare not." The face of the black-robed elder paled, and he quickly clasped his fist and lowered his head respectfully. At this point, he did not even dare to breathe loudly. He had only felt such overwhelming pressure from the old ancestor. Who could have thought that the other party wielded such immense strength as well? And more importantly, he was certain that he had never said his name throughout the entire encounter, not even once. Yet, the other party was still able to identify him correctly. This meant that the other party knew who he was. To call himself Yang Xian on top of that, could he really be that legendary figure? But, he had only met that legendary figure once, and before that figure, he was even less than an ant. It was only because of the old ancestor that he had been able to meet that figure, and he did not even dare to report his name for fear that he would sully the other party's ears. So how could the other party possibly know his name? "You dare not." "It doesn't seem that way to me." Completely different to the humble young man from a moment ago, the person that stood before him at this moment carried an air of disdain for all life forms, as if a being who had transcended the world. The Luo clan's bloodline is powerful, and the art of the Dimension Silencer is a masterpiece. Despite your fortune of being born in the Luo clan, you still managed to make a wreck of yourself. You have reversed the yin-yang of your San Jiao Wan Yin meridians and introduced filth into your zhenqi, resulting in your inability to concentrate your strength. Not only that, your 7 acupoints of primordial chaos are plagued with turbidity, and 3 of them are even reversed. During your breakthrough to the primordial spirit realm, the shortcut you attempted to take ended up damaging your foundation, resulting in the corruption of your internal state. Yet, instead of devoting your time to resolving these problems, you chose to head down here to take advantage of my student. Is it because you think that you are too powerful? At this point, a faint, disdainful smile surfaced on the lips of the young man. Shall I play with you? Shivers immediately ran down Luo Chengxin's spine as he quickly lowered his head in abject fear. The terms that the other party had used, the San Jiao Yin meridians and the 7 acupoints of primordial chaos, would seem like utter nonsense to any other cultivator, but they left him shaking non-stop, as if he had heard something terrifying. Those were the unique terms used only in their Luo clan's art of the Dimension Silencer. The Luo clan's bloodline granted the offspring of the Luo clan with exceptional talent in spatial manipulation. In fact, its ultimate treasure, the Dimension Silencer, was a powerful artifact that could bring about the complete freezing of space. It was due to this reason that the art of the Dimension Silencer was completely different from other cultivation techniques, tailored solely to those with the Luo clan's bloodline. San Jiao, 7 acupoints, these were terms that only the core members of the Luo clan would know of. Yet, the young man before him spoke of them so easily as if they were nothing at all, accurately identifying the flaws in his cultivation even. This had left his entire body turning freezing cold, and sweat trickled down his back endlessly. If he had been doubtful whether the other party was Yang Shi or not a moment ago, at this moment, he dared not harbor such thoughts. Regardless of whether the other party was truly Yang Shi or not, the other party was definitely of the same caliber as their old ancestor. Otherwise, it was impossible for the other party to see through the problems in his cultivation with a single look. As one of the inner clan members of the Luo clan, he had been guided by top-notch master teachers from birth, but limited by his talent, it was inevitable that he erred in his cultivation from time to time. As these errors accumulated, even though it did not hinder him from exerting his strength, it had capped his cultivation. At this point, it was already nigh impossible for him to achieve a breakthrough to higher realms. This was not uncommon among those of the sage clans. After all, no matter how formidable a teacher one had, it was impossible for a teacher to constantly overlook one's cultivation, not to mention that even advanced master teachers too were not infallible either. Besides, if a cultivator could really avoid erring in one's cultivation, wouldn't he be able to advance through the cultivation ranks easily without facing any bottlenecks? That was clearly daydreaming. But, while it was true that he had errors in his cultivation, it would be difficult for most master teachers to discern it. To be able to see through him with just a glance, that was clearly the prowess that only 9-star master teachers wielded. I dare not to. Luo Chengxin's body trembled uncontrollably upon that realization. Humph, if I had not left a sliver of my will in the body of my student, I might have just lost a student today. The young man gazed down at Luo Chengxin coldly in his eyes, as if contemplating whether he should have the latter killed for his insolence. I didn't intend to make a move on Zhongshe. Luo Chengxin gulped down a mouthful of saliva as he hurriedly explained, I watched our little princess grow up, and no matter how reckless I am, I would not dare hurt the person she loves, or else she would hate me for life. No matter what, the relationship between her and Zhongshe is impossible, and I fear that she will be hurt if the both of them get any further involved with one another. That's why I chose to seek Zhongshe to convince him to step away from the matter. Humph. Are you saying that my student is unworthy of the Luo clan? The young man said once more, his tone laced with threat this time around. That's not what I mean. Luo Chengxin shuddered in fear as he hurriedly explained, Yang Shi, you should know the current circumstances surrounding our Luo clan as well. The matrimony between our little princess and the young prodigy of the Zhong clan cannot be changed. At this rate, the both of them will only be hurt in the end. If that is going to be the case, it will be better for us to end it at this point in time to reduce the heartbreak. The young man narrowed his eyes. Their matrimony cannot be changed. Is that due to your Luo clan or the Zhong clan? If it's the latter, I'll find their old ancestor and talk to him about the matter. Luo Chengxin quickly shook his head. The betrothal between the two was decided 20 years ago. The little princess is also a victim in this matter. Decided 20 years ago? The young man frowned. Tell me about it. I believe that young Shi should have heard about the young prodigy of the Zhong clan as well. Even before his birth, he was said to possess the purest bloodline in the Zhong clan. 20 years ago, during the birth of that young prodigy, scarlet clouds covered the entire sky, and a sacred ray of light descended from the heavens. Even Kong Shi's tablet rose into the air, as if acknowledging the arrival of his peer. On that very day, the old ancestor of the Zhong clan sought the old ancestor of our clan, and the both of them agreed on this betrothal, Luo Chengshin said. The marriage ceremony was scheduled for the 3rd month of next year, and this matter can no longer be changed by anyone. 3rd month of next year? The face of the young man darkened, and with a frosty voice, he uttered, "Does a mere marriage ceremony really require an auspicious day to be chosen 20 years prior? It's not really a matter of it being auspicious or not." Luo Chengshin shook his head with a bitter smile. Rather, it seems like there's something huge tied to it. Our old ancestor has already declared this decision to be final, and no one dares go against his orders. Due to this matter, our little princess has caused a huge ruckus in our clan for quite a while, but as this matter was a promise between the old ancestors of both clans, she was unable to change anything. Eventually, she snuck out of the clan and sealed her cultivation such that no one would be able to find her. I was only able to find her recently, and by the time I did, I realized that she was already deeply in love with Zhongshe. That's why I decided to talk Zhongshe into backing down. Something huge is tied to their marriage. What is it? I am not qualified to know of the inner secrets of our clan. I only happened to overhear bits and pieces of it, so I don't know much about it either. However, it should be something very important. After all, as one of the top 3 sage clans, there's no need for our Luo clan to bow down to the Zhong clan, Luo Chengshin replied. Since it's an engagement decided on at birth, is there a reason why the little princess of your Luo clan is unwilling to marry the young prodigy of the Zhong clan? The young man asked. Considering that it was a marriage decided at birth and that both clans were of equal standing, it was likely that the little princess of the Luo clan and the young prodigy of the Zhong clan had grown up side by side, so the relationship between them should not have been too bad. For the little princess to go to the extent of escaping from her clan in order to escape the betrothal, was she not afraid of falling out with her family? Or was there something about the young prodigy of the Zhong clan that was so repulsive to her that she would go to such lengths just to avoid marrying him? Hearing those words, Luo Chengshin could not help but glance at the young man before him with a peculiar look. It felt weird for a figure as powerful as Yang Shi to be so interested in the gossip of their clan. Naturally, he did not dare say those words aloud, and he quickly replied the other party's question. It's just a guess on my part, but I think that our little princess might have rebelled because she's unwilling to marry a person she has never met before. The young prodigy of the Zhong clan is a rather mysterious figure. He has been in seclusion ever since his birth, and unlike most offspring of the sage clans, he has not attended the sanctum of sages either. Not a single person of our Luo clan has seen him before, and this includes our old ancestor as well. Based on what I have heard, it seems like he is busy undergoing some kind of unique inheritance at the moment. No one has seen him before. The young man could not help but frown upon hearing those words. To set an engagement without bringing out the person in question, the Zhong clan sure was bizarre. Indeed. There are many rumors floating around about that young prodigy. Some say that he doesn't possess the talents that he is rumored to possess. Some say that he has failed in awakening his talent, and out of embarrassment, the Zhong clan chose to hide him from the world. Luo Chengshin sighed. There are even some who say that he vanished from the world shortly after his birth, and the Zhong clan has been trying to find him ever since then. In any case, there does not seem to be anyone aside from those of the Zhong clan who have seen that young prodigy before. Thinking about it, the little princess sure was a pitiful person. To have to shoulder the fate of the entire clan at such a young age, even forced to marry a person she had never seen before, it was no wonder she would feel so repulsed and rebel. The young man harumphed coldly. The Zhong clan sure knows how to put on airs. To make a betrothal between the two clans and yet hide their own offspring, I have gotten a glimpse into their shamelessness today. And that young prodigy as well. I really should teach them a lesson about etiquette. Chapter 1173. Entering the Qiu Palace. Luo Chengshin had spoken of the young prodigy of the Zhong clan as a being who wielded unfathomable power in the world, but as the person who possessed the library of Heaven's Path, Zhong Xian was confident that he would be able to crush the other party with sufficient time and make him doubt his own existence. For no reason other than the fact that he had caused Luo Ruoxin so much grievance over the past few years. Anyone who dares to touch my woman will have to suffer my wrath. Noting the killing intent in Yang She's eyes, Luo Chengshin shuddered once more. With a wary tone, he said, Yang She, since Zhong She is your student, I shall not impose on you any longer. I'll take my leave. If only that he had known that Yang She had left his will within the young man's body, he would have never dared to come over and warn the latter. Go. The young man waved his hand. Thank you, Yang She. Luo Chengshin quickly turned around to flee. But barely after taking a few steps, he suddenly halted and hesitated for a moment before fearfully turning around. Mustering all the courage he had, he said, Yang She, pardon me for saying this, but I hope that you will talk Zhong She into letting her go. Our little princess has suffered too much while growing up, and I really hope that she won't be hurt by this matter. Those words left Zhong Xian with a deep frown on his face. But knowing that the other party was really thinking for Luo Ruoxin, he shook his head and said, I'll think about it. You may leave now. Thank you, Yang She. Heaving a sigh of relief, Luo Chengshin quickly left the area. Watching as the other party disappeared into the distance, Zhong Xian finally heaved a sigh of relief himself. That earth-shattering aura vanished in an instant, and as if a deflated balloon, he felt so weakened that it was difficult to even lift his own arm. That was a close shave. I was nearly unable to hold on any more. Zhong Xian patted his chest in relief. Even though Vicious was able to exert an incredibly powerful aura after consuming Kongsha's writing, the fact was that he could not maintain the state for too long. It was fortunate that his soul depth was only slightly beneath the other party's, allowing him to avoid giving himself away. It was also fortunate that he had dashed out of the city to a remote location earlier, or else with the abrupt emanation of such a powerful aura, it would have surely drawn the attention of the experts within the city. All right, I should hurry up and leave. If that fellow finds that something is amiss and returns, I won't be able to deal with him again, Zhong Xian thought as he quickly rushed back to the Combat Master Hall. Not too long later, he finally returned to his accommodation. The tension in his mind finally snapped, and a weariness similar to a soldier who had just fought a war consumed him, lulling him into a deep sleep. However, he forced himself to remain awake so as to ponder over the information he had just received. Even though he had managed to beguile the other party through his means, he knew that luck had a factor to play in it as well. Putting on a disguise before experts of the other party's caliber was no different from dancing above a bed of knives. A single wrong move could very well have cast him into oblivion. Had it not been for his superior mental resilience, he would have long been seen through. Taking a seat on the ground, Zhong Xian meditated for roughly 2 hours before the exhaustion finally receded from his body. I need to possess the strength to stand against the Zhong clan by the 3rd month of next year. Recalling the conversation that he'd had with Luo Chengshin earlier, Zhong Xian could not help feeling greatly pressured. Judging from the other party's tone, it seemed like the marriage was not just to create a bridge between the both clans, it also involved an extremely important matter as well, thus fixing it in stone. Not even the beloved little princess of the Luo clan, Luo Ruoxin, had a say in the matter. As talented as Zhong Xian was, it was too dangerous for him to reveal the fact that he was a celestial master teacher to others. After all, he could not tell for sure what the Luo clan and Zhong clan's attitude toward a celestial master teacher would be, so until he had sufficient power to back up his identity, it was best to keep it under wraps. Thus, he was not intending to play the card unless it really became necessary. So, if he really wanted to marry Luo Ruoxin openly, he would have to swiftly raise his cultivation and his standing. By the 3rd month of next year, he needed to possess sufficient strength to stand toe-to-toe with the Zhong clan. Only then would the Luo clan take him seriously and consider their relationship. Otherwise, there was no way they would offend the Zhong clan and choose a supposed genius over a prodigy whose very birth had caused Kongsha's tablet to levitate in the air. There is still another 8 months or so. I am currently only at St. Tu Dan Pinnacle. If I wish to gain enough power to negotiate with the Luo clan and the Zhong clan, I must at least cultivate to the same level as Luo Chengshen. Saint 7 Dan, Zhongxian thought as immense pressure weighed down on him. Even though he had taken less than a year to advance from the bare bottom to Saint 2 Dan, he knew that it would be harder and harder for him to advance higher from this point onward. Not only would it be harder for him to find the necessary cultivation technique manuals, more importantly, there was a lack on cultivation resources as well. In the past, a couple of low-tier spirit stones were enough for him to advance several realms at once, but now, he was not even certain how long concentrated high-tier spirit stones would suffice for him before he would require pinnacle spirit stone. And more importantly, advancing one's cultivation in Saint Realm required one to cultivate one's soul and mind as well. Sufficient spiritual energy was only the minimum requirement to achieving a breakthrough at this point. Without accomplishing the required state of mind, it was impossible to achieve a breakthrough. Tempering one's state of mind had to be done over a long period of time. It was not something that could be accomplished within a short period of time. As such, even though it was only 5 realms, he knew that it would be extremely difficult for him to cover the gap within just 8 months. Even he did not have absolute confidence in being able to pull it off. Thus, all he could do was work himself down to the bone and make every single second he had count. I must hurry up and cultivate. Ruoxin, wait for me. I won't let you suffer any grievances, Zhongxian muttered with unwavering resolution. After his conversation with Luo Chengshen, it was not hard for him to imagine how difficult it had been for Luo Ruoxin to accept his confession back then. Since the other party had chosen him over everything else, as a man, he could not possibly let her down. No matter what, he was determined to have her marry him openly. He did not want her to suffer the fate that Musha had suffered over the past few centuries. If the Zhong clan stood in his way, he would just have to trample them. With this newfound determination in his mind, he felt his mind suddenly clearing up. His soul seemed to have undergone some kind of change, and his soul energy became even purer than before. Time to cultivate. At the very least, I should try to aim for Saint 4 Dan before daybreak. Sitting on the floor once more, Zhongxian began browsing through the Saint 3 Dan and Saint 4 Dan Heaven's Path Divine Arts, which he had compiled previously. He had already successfully compiled them back at the Qingyuan Empire Master Teacher Pavilion earlier, but in a rush to attend the appraisal convention, he did not have time to look through them. After internalizing the content of both manuals, he flicked his wrist and whipped out the 17 concentrated high-tier spirit stones that he had obtained from Chu Tianxing. At his current level, even high-tier spirit stones were no longer effective on him anymore. Calming his mind, he drove the zhunqi in his body before turning his consciousness toward his origin core. Saint 3 Dan Embryonic Soul Realm was also known as the Origin Soul Realm, and it served to fuse one's origin core with one's soul to create an embryonic primordial spirit. The hardest aspect in this breakthrough was to shatter one's origin core and facilitate its fusion with one's soul in order to create the embryo. There were many cultivators who were unable to overcome in this challenge, resulting in the stagnation of their cultivation. Having cultivated the Heaven's Path Divine Art, even though bottlenecks were pretty much non-existent in his cultivation, it proved to be a problem for him at this point. As his origin core had been tempered to the level of perfection, it was incomparably resilient. It would take a lot more effort for him to shatter his origin core compared to other cultivators. Soul. With a thought, Zhongxian channeled his soul toward his origin core. There were 2 steps to achieving a breakthrough to the embryonic soul realm. Firstly, the cultivator had to fuse their soul together with their origin core. Secondly, the cultivator had to shatter the fused origin core and facilitate its development into an embryo. According to the description in the Heaven's Path Divine Art, I just have to open a small door in the origin core to fuse my soul together with my origin core. Going through the content of the Saint 3 Dan Heaven's Path Divine Art, Zhongxian focused his attention on his origin core and created a small passageway in it. After which, his soul swiftly dived into the passageway to enter his origin core. Catcher. But barely after diving in, its movements suddenly came to an abrupt halt. This is bad. My soul is stuck. Zhongxian's soul was simply too big. After undergoing the Saint Ascension ordeal, it had returned to its original size of 10 meters. While his origin core was much stronger than that of other cultivators, it was still too small to house his soul. He had never thought that he would face such a problem in his cultivation. While it was possible for one to morph the size of one's soul, there was a limit to doing so. This was just like how an elephant would never fit into a walnut no matter how it squeezed itself together. After struggling for a very long to no avail, Zhongxian could only retract his trapped soul with a conflicted look on his face. He already had the required concentrated high-tier spirit stones, and his Heaven's Path divine art had also been perfected, but his soul had turned out to be too big to enter his origin core. If that was the case, he would not even be able to complete the first step of his breakthrough. At this rate, would he be unable to even achieve a breakthrough to Saint 3 Dan? What should I do? Zhongxian gave it a few more tries, but each time, his soul ended up being stuck without fail. There was even one instance when he was nearly unable to pull out his trapped soul. At this point, he felt like he was going to burst into tears. It had not been easy for him to gather so much drive to cultivate, and he had put his mind to achieving a double breakthrough to the primordial spirit realm, but he had already encountered a bump at the very first step of his cultivation. There's no error in the Heaven's Path divine art, but due to me cultivating my soul, it's not suitable for my current state. Zhongxian rubbed his glabella. In the previous realms, the cultivation of his zhenqi and soul were separate, so he had not faced such a problem to date. But the embryonic soul realm required the fusion of the both of them. Typically speaking, zhenqi cultivation and soul cultivation were considered two different branches. Both paths would lead to the peak, so there was little point in pursuing both paths simultaneously. Furthermore, the flaws in the cultivation techniques of the soul oracles made it impossible for one to cultivate both simultaneously. By perfecting the cultivation techniques of the soul oracles, Zhongxian had managed to achieve the impossible, developing his physical body and soul simultaneously. There had not been many problems in the earlier stages, but it was proving to be a problem for him at this moment. What should I do now? Retracting his consciousness from his dantian, Zhongxian rubbed his glabella in frustration. This was the first time he had encountered such a situation. In the past, he had been able to advance easily just by compiling the knowledge of the predecessors through the library of Heaven's Path, but treading on a path that none had walked on before, there was no one he could see for help. It's no wonder Kong Shi said that I have to pave my way forward myself if I wish to achieve greater heights. Blindly following the wisdom of the predecessors might bring me to greater heights in the short term, but it'll only narrow my future path, possibly bringing me to a dead end even. Perhaps, he might have even predicted the problems I would face in my cultivation. Back in the Qiu Wu Palace, Kong Shi had warned him that he should not just follow the teachings of the predecessors but seek his own individual path instead. He had kept the other party's teachings in mind, but it was only at this point that he truly understood what it meant. Walking my own path, how can I do so? In the face of such a situation, with no one whom he could learn from, he could not help but feel completely lost. With a deep frown on his forehead, he fell into deep contemplation. Walking one's own path was easier said than done. That was equivalent to venturing into uncharted territories, an extremely dangerous feat after a long moment of contemplation but still coming up with nothing at all. Zhongxian sighed deeply. Should I head to the Qiu Wu Palace to take another look? Perhaps, I might be able to find something that Kong Shi left behind that will bring me some inspiration. Flicking his wrist, a sphere appeared in his palm. Unique patterns reminiscent of a map were carved on top of it. Back then, he had kept the entirety of the Qiu Wu Palace in the sphere through fusing the map together with it, allowing him to bring it around anywhere he went. Let me go in to take a look. As the master of the sphere, he could easily open a passageway into it. With a thought, he vanished from the spot. Chapter 1174, Heavenly Art of Dimension Unravel Who. In the next moment, he was already standing before the tablet erected right outside the Qiu Wu Palace. The tablet was a gigantic high-tier spirit stone in itself, and it had left him deeply moved back then that he had even considered stealing it. But now high-tier spirit stones were already completely useless to him, so it no longer held as great of an allure to him anymore. These words, they have actually reached the level of evoking vividness. Zhongxian exclaimed as he looked at the three large words, Wu Palace. Back then, his proficiency in painting wasn't too high, so he wasn't able to accurately discern its level. However, looking at it once more now, he was very certain that those 3 words had reached the 8th level. As mere words, the feelings that evoked from them were unable to match up to an entire painting, but nevertheless, if one were to stare at it for too long, they might find themselves sinking uncontrollably into a trance. Chem. Those words. Why does it seem like there is something strange about them? After a short look, just as Zhongxian was about to take his leave, he suddenly exclaimed with a frown. He didn't think that there was anything peculiar about those 3 words initially, but after staring at them for some time, he suddenly felt his zhenqi jolting within his body. To his shock, his zhenqi had suddenly begun flowing on its own accord. It's the circulation pathway for the heavenly demon Great Sorrow Palm. Feeling his zhenqi flowing under the effects of the 3 words, Zhongxian couldn't help but fall in a dazed state. He recognized the circulation pathway which his zhenqi was moving at to be the heavenly demon Great Sorrow Palm, which he had learned in ancient sage Qiu Wu's trial back then. But why would he have such a reaction just by looking at those 3 words? Let me give it a try. Allowing his zhenqi to move freely, Zhongxian raised his palm and lightly thrust it towards the tablet after resolving all of the flaws of the heavenly demon Great Sorrow Palm, raising it to the level of a Heaven's Path technique. He had gained the ability to manipulate the strength of battle technique freely at his will. Even though he had struck the tablet squarely, the latter didn't sustain the slightest damage at all. Wang. As soon as his palm struck the tablet, those 3 words suddenly emanated a blinding glow. With a stagger, Zhongxian vanished from the spot. When he opened his eyes once more, he found that he had entered another space. The space wasn't too large, and the area was filled with all kinds of inscriptions. Heavenly Art of Dimension Unravel. Zhongxian read the line of words right before him, and his eyes narrowed in astonishment. When those inscriptions were placed together, they formed a unique secret art known as the Heavenly Art of Dimension Unravel. Just by reading its content, Zhongxian could tell that it was an incredibly profound technique, far exceeding any other secret art he had learned thus far. Could this be the heritage of the Qiu Wu Palace? A thought suddenly struck Zhongxian's mind, and he couldn't help but gasp. Back then, after being traumatized by him, ancient sage Qiu Wu's will ended up vanishing before it could reveal where the heritage was located. Zhongxian had thought that the heritage was a gone case after that matter, but who could have thought that it would actually be hidden within a tablet at the entrance? All who had entered the Qiu Wu Palace had headed straight for its deepest regions in hopes of acquiring the greatest treasure within it. What an irony it was for the most valuable heritage to actually be located in the most conspicuous and open place instead. However, it seemed like the key to entering this place was to execute the heavenly demon Great Sorrow Palm. Without knowing the battle technique, even if one were to stand before the tablet and notice its peculiarity, one would still be unable to enter it and obtain the heritage. The heavenly art of dimension Unravel views the space of heavens and earth as 2 separate entities, and it seeks to manipulate the 2 through calculations made through the number of grand transformation 1. While those inscriptions looked foreign to Zhongxian, for some reason, he was still able to fathom the meaning behind them. Similar to the heavenly demon Great Sorrow Palm, this secret art is also divided into 5 dans. Those who have mastered the 5th dan will be qualified to stand at the very peak of the world, possessing strength not beneath mine. Taking the inscriptions into sight, Zhongxian's eyes lit up in excitement. Initially, due to his possession of the Library of Heaven's Path, he wasn't particularly concerned about obtaining ancient sage Qiu Wu's heritage. However, after looking through the inscriptions, he was glad that he had stumbled upon the heritage eventually. The heavenly art of dimension Unravel was truly a powerful technique. If he were to cultivate it well, he would be able to gain a strong grasp over the spatial laws, allowing him to manipulate space skillfully. With that, his fighting prowess could easily be enhanced manyfold. If I could just cultivate the heavenly art of dimension Unravel to 2 dan pinnacle, I would at least be able to escape from Luo Chengxian even if I were to encounter him once more. Zhongxian thought in agitation. So far, Luo Chengxian was the strongest expert he had encountered, a true Saint 7 dan expert. Even if he were to use all of his means, he still wouldn't stand a chance against the other party, and even fleeing was out of the question. But with the heavenly art of dimension unravel, everything would be different. Even if he were to just master the secret art to 2 Dan, he would still be able to struggle free of the other party's spatial seal and make his escape. However, it seemed like the secret art had an exceptionally high requirement on one's Junchi capacity as well. From the looks of it, it seemed like it would be impossible to cultivate it to 2 Dan without possessing the cultivation of leaving Aperture Realm Pinnacle. After scanning all of the inscriptions and successfully collecting them into the Library of Heaven's Path, Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. Let me see if I can compile it into the level of Heaven's Path. Over the past few days, he had collected an astounding number of battle technique and secret art manuals. Perhaps, if he were to compile the heavenly art of dimension unravel with them, he might just be able to perfect the secret art. Compile. A book materialized before Zhongxian's eyes. Flipping open the book, the knowledge contained within the manual flowed into his mind. I have managed to perfect the 1 Dan heavenly art of dimension unravel, but I'm still a far way off from perfecting the 2 Dan. While he had only managed to perfect the 1 Dan heavenly art of dimension unravel, the results were well within his expectations. Overall, he was still satisfied with the outcome. While the heavenly art of dimension unravel formed an entire whole, it was subdivided into multiple dans with increasing levels of profoundness. So far, the most powerful battle technique he had collected so far was only at Saint Intermediate tier. As powerful as Qingyuan Empire was, the battle technique manuals that it had was still insufficient for him to perfect the entire heavenly art of dimension unravel. In fact, it was already a huge blessing that he was able to perfect the 1 Dan of the secret art here. Let me try cultivating the secret art. Zhongxian swiftly internalized the 1 Dan heavenly art of dimension unravel before backing out of the space within the tablet. He swiftly searched for a quiet location in the Qiu Palace before whipping out his concentrated high-tier spirit stones to cultivate the secret art. The heavenly art of dimension unravel was a technique that granted one the ability to manipulate space, so in the strictest sense, it couldn't be considered as a cultivation technique or battle technique. If one were to fully master the secret art, one would be able to manipulate space and traverse through it freely. In fact, it was possible to cover a distance of over 100 million li within a single day through it. All in all, the secret art could be divided into 5 realms, which were namely compress, traverse, control, creation, and destruction. One who masters the 1 Dan heavenly art of dimension unravel would be able to compress space, allowing one to cover a distance of 100 meters in a single step. If used well in battle, it could allow one to catch one's opponents off guard and launch a surprise assault or escape from a cornered situation. Going through the cultivation technique in his mind, Zhongxian drove his zhenqi, and before long, he entered a unique trance. In this state, his comprehension of spatial laws swiftly deepened. A long time later, he opened his eyes once more and stood up. Then, he took a single step forward. Hula! His figure suddenly vanished on the spot and appeared at a distance of 100 meters ahead. I succeeded. Zhongxian's eyes lit up. Cultivating the heavenly art of dimension unravel wouldn't raise his cultivation, but it would deepen his understanding over the spatial laws. If paired with his unbounded treader, he would be able to flit from place to place like a specter. With my current speed and grasp of spatial laws, I should be able to match even Vice Pavilion Master Tian in a battle. With Zhongxian's current fighting prowess, he could already be considered an invincible existence amongst primordial spirit cultivators. Even so, it was still difficult for him to go up against half-leaving Aperture Realm experts like Vice Pavilion Master Tian. However, after learning the heavenly art of dimension unravel and gaining a deeper understanding of space, half-leaving Aperture Realm experts no longer posed as great of a threat to him anymore. With his enhanced understanding of space, even if the other party were to use his primordial spirit to suppress him, he would still be able to easily struggle free. On top of that, as long as he were to play his cards well, he could abruptly appear before his enemy and deal out a lethal blow before the latter could process what was going on. More importantly, after learning the 1 Dan heavenly art of dimension unravel, I am already able to set up some basic spatial formation. While the spatial formations I can create is still severely limited on many aspects, it has the ability to isolate individuals within it from the rest of the world, as well as to compress matter. Zhongxian chuckled in delight. It was due to his soul being too big that he was unable to fuse it into his origin core, but with the heavenly art of dimension unravel, as long as he could find a way to set up a spatial formation to compress his soul should be able to enter the passageway of his origin core and successfully fuse the two together. However, Zhongxian's delight didn't last for too long. Looking at the powdery remains of the concentrated high-tier spirit stones on the ground, he couldn't help but rub his glabella and lament. As powerful as the secret art is, the depletion of Zhongxi is really a little unacceptable. Just to cultivate the one-dan heavenly art of dimension unravel, he ended up using up the 17 concentrated high-tier spirit stones which he obtained with great difficulty. Without a doubt, the heavenly art of dimension unravel was an invaluable secret art, allowing one to comprehend the essence of space. However, the depletion that resulted from its cultivation was equally fearsome as well. Initially, he had been thinking that with the concentrated high-tier spirit stones he had at the moment, it should suffice for him to reach embryonic soul realm pinnacle at the minimum, but before he ended up expending all of them before he could even start. How stifling. I really must find a way to earn more money, Zhongxian thought as he stood up and left the Qiu Wu Palace. In any case, at least he had managed to resolve the problem regarding his soul being unable to enter his origin core. All he had to do now was to find a way to earn more concentrated high-tier spirit stones. The days without money sure was difficult to endure. But where can I earn more concentrated high-tier spirit stones? Returning back to his room, Zhongxian lowered his head and pondered instead of anxious heading out. Even if he wanted to earn concentrated high-tier spirit stones, he had to have a concrete direction first. Considering that the Qingyuan royal family only had 17 and the Combat Master Hall could only afford to take out 10. Where else in Qingyuan City could he possibly find more concentrated high-tier spirit stones? I should go and ask Hall Master Xing. Knowing that it would be futile for him to rack his brain over it since he didn't have much of an understanding of Qingyuan City in the first place, Zhongxian stood up and began heading over to Hall Master Xing's residence. By this point, the sun had already risen at the horizon. The brilliant rays of the sun pierced through the coldness of the night, bringing warmth to the world. It didn't take long for Zhongxian to find Hall Master Xing. At this point, the latter had already mastered the Vitreous Heart-Tempering Sutra. Over the past few days, his primordial spirit had become even purer, and his aura felt denser than before. At this rate, it shouldn't be long before Hall Master Xing was ready to face the Leaving Aperture ordeal and push for a breakthrough to Leaving Aperture Realm Primary Stage. Hall Master Xing, how are Elder Shu and the others? I hope that they aren't causing you any problem. Yesterday, Elder Shu and the others were brought away from those of the Combat Master Hall, and given that a day has passed since then, they should have been settled down by now. They aren't causing any trouble, but something weird did happen. Yesterday, Butler's son happened to pass by their quarters, and shortly after, all of them suddenly chose to join the Shenxian faction as well. Hall Master Xing said with a perplexed look the Poison Masters were far more compliant than he expected them to be, but if he had to point out something weird about them, it would be their excessive respect towards Zhongxian's butler. Sun Qiong's strength was unremarkable, but for some reason, the Poison Masters from the Poison Hall would bow respectfully to him whenever they met the latter. As such, that butler extended an invitation to the Poison Masters to join the Shenxian faction as well, and naturally, that bunch accepted the offer and became members of the Shenxian faction as well. But of course, that wasn't at odds with them being members of the Combat Master Hall, so it wasn't really a big problem. I see. Anyway, I'm glad that they aren't causing any trouble. They have been through a lot, so I hope that you can treat them kindly. They do possess expertise in a field that the Combat Master Hall is lacking in, so it would be good to have the other combat masters to interact with them, allowing them to learn from one another. Zhongxian nodded. That is my intention as well. Right, Principal Zhong, the other conferred Empire Combat Master Halls will be coming over for a friendly spar a few days later, so if you have some time, I would like to invite you to conduct a few lectures for our combat masters. Hall Master Xing said. The other conferred Empire Combat Master Halls will be coming over for a friendly spar? That's right. They should be arriving in 3 days' time. Hall Master Xing nodded. Chapter 1175. All at once Zhong Xian's eyes lit up, and he hurriedly asked, "How many combat master halls will there be? Will they be bringing many concentrated high-tier spirit stones with them?" He was currently about to go insane from a lack of money. If the conferred Empire combat master halls that were coming over for the friendly spa were wealthy, he could try to think of a way to earn some from them. As soon as the words concentrated high-tier spirit stones came out of Zhong Xian's words, Hall Master Xing could immediately guess what the other party was thinking about, and a helpless smile surfaced on his lips. There are 3 conferred Empire combat master halls coming over. They are of the same tier as our branch, so it's unlikely that they will have many concentrated high-tier spirit stones on them. Same tier? Indeed. There is a total of 8 conferred empires under the Empire Alliance. 4 of them belong in the upper tier, whereas the remaining 4, which includes our Qingyuan conferred empire, belong to the lower tier. The ones that are coming over for the friendly spa this time around belong to the latter group. The friendly spa is actually a selection exercise for us to select 20 candidates out of the 4 combat master halls for the opportunity to train in the Qianchong conferred empire, Hall Master Xing explained. In previous years, our Qingyuan Empire Combat Master Hall has only been able to acquire 2 slots at maximum, putting us at the lowest rank among the 4 Combat Master Halls. But this time around, seeing that our Combat Masters have made massive improvements after training with the Xianxian faction, I hope to try to vie for a few more slots. Train at the Qianchong Conferred Empire? Is there some kind of blessed land for cultivation there? Zhong Xian asked. Back then, he had headed to the Huanyu Empire in order to access the cleansing lake, which was said to be beneficial to soul cultivation. Could it be that the Qianchong Empire had something similar to that as well? Speaking of blessed lands, there is indeed one of them there. The Qianchong Empire has a sword pool, which harnesses boundless sword intent and sword art. If a cultivator tempers themselves in the sword pool, it will sure enhance their fighting prowess by leaps and bounds. As such, this slot is very important to our Qingyuan Empire Combat Master Hall. On top of that, the headquarters also reward the conferred Empire Combat Master Halls according to the number of slots they obtain. The more slots a certain Combat Master Hall obtains, the more resources it will be entitled to. Hall Master Xing said. Resources. That single word triggered Zhong Xian's interest, and his eyes immediately lit up. Indeed. In the previous friendly spa, the Chongyuan Conferred Empire obtained the most slot, and the headquarters rewarded them with 100 concentrated high-tier spirit stones, Hall Master Xing replied. You said, 100 concentrated high-tier spirit stones? Zhong Xian's hands began trembling in excitement. If he were to obtain so many concentrated high-tier spirit stones, it would definitely be more than sufficient for him to push for a breakthrough straight to the primordial spirit realm pinnacle. That's right. Hall Master Xing nodded. To be honest with you, while it's called a friendly spa, in essence, it could be regarded as a military display for the Combat Master Halls as well. Each Combat Master Hall will send out the strongest expert for each cultivation level and pit them against one another, and to the side that obtains the most victories, the headquarters will not hesitate to award them more resources. In a sense, it serves to motivate the subordinate Combat Master Halls and Combat Masters to work more diligently than ever. Zhong Xian nodded in realization. If one were to view the Combat Master Hall as an army, this friendly spa would be similar to a tournament among the different units. In times of peace, competition could pressure the Combat Master Halls and their Combat Masters into pushing themselves to greater heights. Otherwise, without any concrete aims and goals for them to strive for, the morale and discipline of the Combat Masters could gradually slacken. If Principal Zhong can help offer some pointers to our Combat Masters and help them clinch the top position, I am willing to share half of the awarded concentrated high-tier spirit stones with you. That's already the most that I can give you within the limits of my authority, so I am really unable to share any more with you. Hall Master Xing said. The young man before him did not just possess superior fighting prowess, granting him nigh invincible might among his peers, his comprehension of combat and battle techniques had also achieved an unfathomable level. While he rarely offered any guidance to others, his pointers were always spot on, leaving one deeply enlightened by his teachings. If they could really engage his help, the Qingyuan Empire Combat Master Hall could very well surpass its previous results and reach a new peak. It was with this in mind that Hall Master Xing had offered Zhong Xian such generous terms upon seeing the latter. Deal. Before Hall Master Xing could finish his words, the young man before him had already interjected decisively. Was there any need to hesitate over the matter? What he was lacking at this very moment was concentrated high-tier spirit stones. Putting aside half of the total reward pool, even if Hall Master Xing had offered him just 1/3 of it, he would still have accepted the request without any hesitation. Seeing that Zhong Xian had agreed to the request, Hall Master Xing heaved a sigh of relief. It's settled then. If nothing goes wrong, the men from the other 3 combat master halls should be arriving within 3 days. Principal Zhong, I'll leave the training of the combat masters completely in your hands, so feel free to do whatever you want. Don't worry, I'll order them to abide by your commands unconditionally. You said earlier that the friendly spa is a fight among the strongest cultivator of each cultivation realm. May I know what the specific cultivation levels for the friendly spas are, and have the candidates been chosen yet? Zhong Xian asked. All in all, there are 20 candidates, and the cultivation levels range from Chrysalis Realm Primary Stage to Spiritual Perception Realm Pinnacle. All in all, 20 cultivation stages. We have already chosen the candidates, Hall Master Xing replied. Chrysalis Realm, Half-Saint, Nascent Saint, Void Pursuit Realm, and Spiritual Perception Realm, and each realm consisted of Primary Stage, Intermediate Stage, Advanced Stage, and Pinnacle. This added up to 20 cultivation stages. Each Combat Master Hall would dispatch their strongest expert for each of the cultivation stages for the friendly spa, and the ultimate winner in that class would be entitled to the nomination slot. Where are they? Bring me over to meet them. Since Hall Master Xing had already chosen the candidates, the remaining part was rather simple. He would just have to find what each individual was skilled in and offer the other party pointers in that aspect so as to maximize the other party's fighting prowess. They are currently in the training hall. Hall Master Xing smiled as he quickly led the way over. The training hall was located in the vicinity of the martial arts division, and it was a place where combat masters sparred with one another in their free time. The hall was extremely spacious. There were 4 dueling platforms erected at the very center with a spectator stand at the outer perimeter. At the same time, there were also seclusion chambers for combat masters to rest in between battles as well. Even before entering the training hall, the sound of swift air currents could be heard in the air. It seemed like there were quite a few people sparring within the training hall. Excited cheers and anxious shouts could be heard here and there, creating a lively atmosphere. Walking into the training hall, Zhong Xian swiftly saw 2 combat masters clashing with one another on one of the dueling platforms. Elegant moves sprung forth from both parties one after another as their immense strength collided again and again, drawing in fixated gazes on them. Surrounding the dueling platform was around a dozen combat masters. Whenever they saw a formidable move being executed, they would cheer in excitement. Zhong Xian took a swift look through the group, and to his astonishment, he found 2 familiar faces, Shahao from the Inner Breath Division and Jiao Tan from the Martial Arts Division. These 2 were top-notch geniuses from the Combat Master Hall, so it was not too surprising that the both of them had made it onto the list of candidates to participate in the friendly spa. Hall Master Xing, Zhong Shi. Upon seeing the 2 figures walking over from the entrance, the crowd quickly halted what they were doing and clasped their fists respectfully. Hall Master Xing stepped forward and said, "There's no need to stand on ceremony. I believe that all of you should be familiar with Principal Zhong, so I shall not waste any time introducing him to you all again." The crowd nodded. In the past few days that Zhong Xian had spent in the Combat Master Hall, he had paid a visit to all the divisions and caused a huge ruckus in each of them. They would have to have been living under a rock to have not heard of him. A person who consecutively broke the records of every single trial in the Combat Master Hall, and by an inconceivably large margin at that. At this point, they were filled with nothing but admiration and awe for the other party. Our Combat Master Hall has high expectations for the friendly spa with the other conferred Empire Combat Master Halls that will be coming here in 3 days' time. In view of that, we have specially invited Principal Zhong over here to conduct special training for all of you. I expect all of you to cooperate fully with him, got that? Yes, Hall Master Xing. Upon hearing that Zhong Xian was going to train them, the eyes of the combat masters immediately lit up in excitement. They had witnessed the astounding might of the Shenzhen faction with their very own eyes. To be taught by the person who had transformed an ordinary master-teacher academy filled with ordinary master-teachers into a power whose fighting prowess exceeded combat masters of the same cultivation. They could not help but shudder in excitement as they imagined how their fighting prowess would soar within the next 3 days. Principal Zhong, why don't you come up here and say a few words as well? Hall Master Xing invited with a smile. Yuan Zhongxian nodded. Without wasting any time on pleasantries, he flicked his wrist and whipped out some rope before saying, Hall Master Xing, please tie my hands up. Ah! Hall Master Xing was stunned. Please tie my hands up. Hall Master Xing had no idea what Zhongxian was up to, but the latter must have had his own reasons for making such a request. Thus, without any further hesitation, he pulled Zhongxian's hands behind his back and tied them firmly together. Struggling a little, Zhongxian nodded in satisfaction when he confirmed that he was unable to break out of his binds. Then, he leaped onto the stage and said, suppress all of your cultivation to Chrysalis Realm Primary Stage and, come at me together. After saying those words, Zhongxian swiftly suppressed his Saint Tu Dan Pinnacle cultivation down to Chrysalis Realm Primary Stage before standing patiently at a corner of the dueling platform. You want all of us to attack you together? Zhongshe, you intend to fight all of us with your hands bound? Is this for real? Zhongshe, I admire your strength, but to think that you will be able to fight against all of us with your hands bound. I have to say that you are really taking us too lightly. Seeing Zhongxian's actions, the faces of the combat masters flushed crimson, and they could not help but narrow their eyes slightly in anger. No matter what, they were the geniuses specially picked out by the Combat Master Hall to participate in the friendly spar, the strongest combat masters in their power class. It was true that Zhongxian possessed strength far surpassing theirs, and one-on-one, they would stand no match at all. However, to challenge all 20 of them with his hands bound. Was he not mocking them? Why? You dare not accept my challenge? Despite Zhongxian's provocations, none of the 20 candidates dared step forward. Thus, Zhongxian glanced at them leisurely and continued. Since that's the case, I'll leave behind 2 footprints here. If any one of you can make me take a single step away from here, I'll consider it my loss. As he spoke, he stepped lightly on the ground, and 2 footprints appeared on the sturdy ground of the dueling platform. What pure zhenqi! The crowd widened their eyes at that sight. Given that the dueling platforms would have to endure the might of the cultivators fighting above it, they had been constructed with the most resilient of materials. On top of that, there were also several seals cast over them, such that even Saint Realm experts would struggle to make a mark on them. Yet, despite lowering his cultivation to Chrysalis Realm Primary Stage, the other party had left such a clear imprint on the dueling platform just by stepping lightly on it. Only a cultivator with unbelievably pure zhenqi could possibly concentrate their strength to their feet to such an extent. The purity of Zhongshe's zhenqi is indeed incredible. However, to defeat all of us while neither using your hands nor moving your feet, even for an expert of your caliber, that should be an impossible task. After a short moment, a combat master suddenly harumphed before leaping onto the stage. Why don't I test it out first? If you are able to defeat me even like that, we will go against you all at once. The combat master was none other than Shi Hao. He was the young man who had suppressed his cultivation for 20 whole years to achieve a new record for the trial of inner breath, only to be outdone by Zhongxian a few moments later. After that traumatizing experience, he had managed to achieve a breakthrough, and he was currently a Saint Tu Dan intermediate stage expert. Hearing Shi Hao's suggestion, the remaining combat masters nodded in agreement. As fellow peers, they were aware of the immense strength that Shi Hao wielded, and they trusted deeply in his capabilities. Through watching the battle between him and Zhongxian, they would be able to discern the fighting prowess of the latter with his hands bound and feet in place. Jeji. After stepping onto the stage, Shi Hao wasted no time with words and swiftly suppressed his cultivation to Chrysalis Realm Primary Stage, just like Zhongxian. Zhongshe, please guide me, Shi Hao said with narrowed eyes. Raising his hand, He sent a powerful burst of zhengqi toward Zhongxian before charging forward. Even before Shi Hao's figure reached Zhongxian, the burst of zhengqi he had sent prior had already arrived. Shi Hao knew of the strength that Zhongxian possessed, so he did not hesitate to devote his full strength to the burst of zhengqi. Under the immense might of the burst of zhengqi, even the sturdy ground of the dueling platform could not help but tremble uncontrollably. Chapter 1176, Infinitesimal Maneuver Not Bad. Seeing how Shi Hao was no longer relying on brute force as he had done previously after the past few days of training, Zhongxian nodded in approval. Facing the other party's assault, he stood his ground firmly and tilted his body slightly. Voila! Shi Hao's palm strike flowed right past Zhongxian's shoulders, missing by just a hair's breadth. This evasion was truly beautifully carried out. A split second earlier, and the other party might still be able to alter the trajectory of his strike to launch a different attack. A split second later, and he would have been injured by the other party's strike. This is infinitesimal maneuver? Beneath the dueling platform, Hall Master Xing narrowed his eyes in shock. Hall Master Xing, what is infinitesimal maneuver? An uncomprehending combat master asked doubtfully. Infinitesimal maneuver is the act of precisely calculating the might, timing, and trajectory of an opponent's offense and making the corresponding maneuvers to neutralize the offense. Through doing so, one is able to dodge any attack with ease and even prepare a counterattack in advance, allowing one to turn the tables in an instant, Hall Master Xing explained. The fundamental principle behind infinitesimal maneuver involved dodging attacks at the very last moment so that the opponent would not have chance to alter their offense, and at a close proximity, one would be in a good position to launch a counterattack and turn the tables. The theory behind infinitesimal maneuver was simple, but it was too difficult to carry it out in practice. Not only did one need to have an exceptional eye of discernment and sharp reflexes, more importantly, one's state of mind needed to have reached a certain mark as well. Ultimately, humans were living beings, not puppets that would blindly follow orders. Inevitably, a cultivator would feel nervous and uncertain when a sword was right before them, and there would be an instinctive desire to protect themselves and distance themselves from the sword. Even among leaving aperture realm experts, I only know of a very small handful who have reached such a realm, and even I have not reached this level yet. I honestly didn't expect Principal Zhong to have achieved this level, Hall Master Xing remarked in awe. Leaving aperture realm? The crowd was astonished. No wonder Zhongxian was so formidable, shattering all the records in the Combat Master Hall. His talent in martial arts had indeed far exceeded theirs. While the crowd was still shocked by the matter, Zhongxian, who had just dodged Shi Hao's palm, began to launch his counterattack. At this point, Zhongxian was already close to Shi Hao as a result of latter's palm strike, and with a slight jerk of his shoulder, he lightly struck the other party's chest. Who? Before Shi Hao could even react, his figure had already retreated into the distance before crashing onto the ground. Shi Hao swiftly got up, and with a pale face, he clasped his fist and bowed. I have lost. He knew that the other party had gone easy on him, or else things would not have ended so easily. If the other party had willed it so, he could have died from that shoulder jerk itself. Zhongxian turned to the remaining combat masters and said, "Come at me all at once." Voila! This time, the remaining combat masters leaped onto the dueling platform without any hesitation. A young man amid the combat masters bellowed, "Let's surround him and use our fastest battle techniques to overwhelm him. I don't believe that he will be able to dodge every single one of our attacks." He was none other than Jiao Tan. As the genius of the martial arts division, he had a deep understanding of combat. With just a look, he was able to instantaneously identify what Zhongxian's flaws would be with his hands tied. The remaining 19 combat masters swiftly took their positions around Zhongxian, and when a loud move was shouted by Jiao Tan, all of them executed their fastest battle techniques simultaneously. Su 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 su. The loud whirring of wind sounded on the dueling platform. In that instant, it was as if countless arrows were raining down from the sky, covering Zhongxian entirely. Let's see how he will deal with such a situation, Hall Master Xing muttered as he stared at the situation on the dueling platform intently, not daring to blink. Every member of the Combat Master Hall had learned all sorts of collaborative formations, which allowed them to collaborate with one another under any circumstances, regardless of how many people they had, thus synergizing their offense together and exerting a fighting prowess far beyond what they could achieve individually. Despite having suppressed their cultivation to Chrysalis Realm primary stage, the simultaneous offense of the 19 combat masters was truly fearsome. Even a nascent saint would have been crushed into a lump of meat in the face of their combined might. Intrigued to see how the talented Zhong Xian would neutralize this situation, Hall Master Xing drove his strength as a leaving aperture realm cultivator, and everything on the stage seemed to slow down for him. He could perceive even the slightest of gestures made by anyone on top of the dueling platform with perfect clarity. Fist, finger, palm, head, leg. All sorts of attacks from the 19 combat masters simultaneously fell upon Zhong Xian. They were all the most talented geniuses of the Combat Master Hall, and under the incredible might of their collaboration, even the surrounding air seemed to have been thrown into a state of disarray, producing a series of sonic booms in the air. Seeing the storm-like offense carried out by the 19 combat masters, Hall Master Xing unwittingly imaged himself in Zhong Xian's position, and his body shuddered slightly in apprehension. Even with his current fighting prowess, he knew that he would not stand a chance against that barrage of attacks if he suppressed his cultivation as well. Looking intently to see how Zhong Xian would deal with such a situation, he saw the latter standing still on the spot instead, not moving in the least. It was as if he had not even realized the precarious situation he was in. This attack could deal significant damage to him even if he didn't suppress his cultivation, but he still isn't planning to avoid it. Hall Master Xing was appalled. However, in the next instant, his eyes suddenly narrowed in astonishment. He realized that the other party was not standing still on the spot at all. On the contrary, the other party was moving so quickly and slightly that it was imperceptible to the naked eye. Even with his spiritual perception, he was only able to make out bits and pieces of it. Hualala. Due to Zhong Xian's slight movements, the attacks of the combat masters ended up falling empty. Astonishingly, despite the encirclement that they had put up, they were not able to land even a single blow on the unmoving Zhong Xian. This. Hall Master Xing felt his throat running dry. Back when he, Division Head Liao, and Division Head Wei had assaulted the other party at the trial of inner demons, he clearly had not been that formidable. How could he suddenly have grown so much more powerful within 3 short days? In this instant, it seemed as if the young man had absolute control over the space around him. Regardless of whether the attack had come from the front or the back, he could perceive it with absolute precision and move accordingly. All right, it should be my turn now. At this moment, a nonchalant voice suddenly sounded from the dueling platform. That voice carried a quality that seemed as if it had come from the primordial era, reverberating deeply in his mind, leaving him feeling lightheaded. *T. This is a demonic tune. Hall Master Xing widened his eyes in alarm. He was just about to warn the combat masters on the dueling platform when he saw that the eyes of the 19 on the stage were glazed. It was already too late. They had fallen in a trance. Voila. Following that, instead of making use of this opportunity to launch an assault, Zhong Xian swept a nonchalant gaze over the combat masters. His movements were poised and dignified, reminiscent of an emperor assessing his soldiers authoritatively or a strict teacher staring down on students who had skipped class. This seemingly simple gesture effected endless fear and deference within the hearts of the combat masters. Putong. One of the combat masters who had a lower soul depth could not take it any longer and caved in to Zhong Xian's gaze. He kneeled down onto the floor and pleaded for forgiveness. I was wrong, please forgive me. I will not dare to do it again. While the other combat masters did not cave in directly, their bodies were wobbling on the spot, an indication that their minds were swiftly approaching their limits. There's no need to continue the battle any longer. You have all lost. Hall Master Xing quickly leaped onto the dueling platform to halt the duel. After which, he subconsciously turned his gaze toward Zhong Xian once more to assess the young man. Facing the assault of 19 men with his feet planted on the ground and hands tied behind his back, he was still able to fend off the storm-like barrage of attacks easily. Not only so, with just a single sentence, he had incapacitated all of them, and with a gaze, he had forced all of them into submission. This was too fearsome. Yes. It was only after hearing Hall Master Xing's bellow that everyone finally recovered from their trance. At this point, their robes were already completely drenched with sweat. Facing Zhong Xian once more, they subconsciously took a step back out of fear. They did not even realize when they had fallen into a trance. If the other party had borne ill intentions toward them, they would have been corpses by now. Paying no heed to the shocked combat masters, Hall Master Xing walked up to Zhong Xian and asked in bewilderment, "Principal Zhong, you should have utilized the means of a terpsichore earlier, right?" The other party's words had been imbued with the ability of a demonic tunist, that he could be certain of, but that sweeping gaze at the very end, he was not too sure, but it deeply resembled the ability of terpsichores. "That's right." Zhong Xian nodded. "Terpsichores are able to command such a powerful presence as well?" Hall Master Xing frowned in incomprehension. In his mind, terpsichores were scantily dressed ladies who beguiled others through their dances, but Principal Zhong's gestures were reminiscent of a regal emperor, and his eyes carried authority that none would dare defy. Were terpsichores capable of doing this as well? The abilities of a terpsichore are not just centered around charm. If that was all there was to the occupation, Kongshe would not have allowed this occupation to be classified as a unique occupation in the first place. Those who have reached the peak of terpsichorean arts are capable of influencing others with just a simple gaze or gesture, granting them unthinkable fighting prowess in battle, Zhong Xian said calmly as he undid the ropes behind him with a slight jerk of his hands. If terpsichores had to rely on their physical features and alluring dances to charm and attack other cultivators, they would have been unworthy of being one of the unique occupations. As the saying went, the greatest sound is silence, and the greatest form is formless. If the heritage of terpsichores had truly been that shallow, there was no way it would have been able to withstand the trial of time. "I am enlightened," Hall Master Xing replied with his face slightly reddened in embarrassment. To be honest, as a combat master, he had always looked down on the terpsichore occupation. He had thought that they were a shallow occupation that used their physical traits to charm others, but the situation had clearly shown him that there was no such thing as an occupation being unworthy of respect. There were only people who were unworthy of respect. Turning his attention away from Hall Master Xing, Zhong Xian turned to the candidates once more and said, "Despite coming at me together, none of you managed to touch me. Is there anyone who disagrees with the results and would like to give it another go? We dare not. We are completely in awe of you. Zhongshe, we beseech you to teach us well." The crowd looked at Zhong Xian with impassioned, fiery eyes. If they had only been impressed by Zhong Xian's talent previously, after that battle, they had no choice but to acknowledge that they were inferior to the young man in every respect. It was almost as if they lived in two different worlds. To be able to learn from a person like that was indubitably something extremely fortunate. Yuan, seeing that the attitudes of the crowd had changed, Zhong Xian nodded in satisfaction. The reason he had chosen to have his hands and feet bound to fight with those combat masters was not to show off but to shake their confidence and win their trust instead. This would be extremely important if he wanted to induce a metamorphosis in them within just 3 days. Since no one wants to spar with me anymore, I'll begin the training exercise. Every single one of you will have a different task to deal with, and you must accomplish it within 3 days. If you fail, don't blame me not getting cruel. The crowd nodded. Yes, Yuan. All of you are different from the members of the Shenshen faction. Their eye of discernment and combat sense were not too strong when they first joined the organization, so I could simply impart everything I knew to them. You guys are different. Having internalized countless battle techniques, my lectures on combat sense will likely have minimal effects on you. So, I can only resort to another method. Seeing the crowd agree to it, Zhong Xian flicked his wrist, took out a few pieces of paper, and swiftly jotted down 20 different training plans. All right, I have designed the training plans specially for each of you. Cultivate strictly according to your. The combat masters took the training plans and swiftly lowered their gazes to look at them excitedly. However, barely after taking a look, their eyes nearly bulged out of their sockets from shock. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.